raging for the last 2 years, and those asylum seekers or economic migrants who make it from Sudan to the UK have a 99% chance of being given leave to remain. So I spent several hours talking to immigration chiefs here in Benghazi on the east side of Libya. The Libyan National Army has a very good grip on the immigration problem, albeit fighting against a huge crisis with limited resources. There is a very, very clear process of giving people proper health checks, the life-saving care that they need, and then working out where it is exactly that they've come from. Their message to the UK is that you are fueling this problem. You are effectively advertising a great new life for people from sub-Saharan Africa. They actually said, you know, what do you think happens when a guy from Sudan comes up through Libya and makes his way all the way to the UK and gets put in a luxurious hotel and provided with everything? And make no mistake, it is a perilous journey. We see it from the end point. We see the channel crossing as the dangerous bit. But actually where these journeys begin is in the hot desert. Many, many tens of kilometres have to be covered on foot by these migrants. And as many as 1 in 4 do not make it. That means bodies in the desert. The Libyan authorities are having to recover bodies in the desert. About the UK and how much awareness. Please understand the scale of what we are dealing with here with very, very limited resources. Once again, you know, people come in from charities, from NGOs, they use warm words, and the authorities here told me the only thing that we ever get is maybe a few toothbrushes and some nappies for the babies.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
And a very good morning to you. It is rapidly coming up to 3 minutes past 10 o'clock on this Sunday, the 28th of December. 2025. This is Phil Dave in for Peter Cardwell with you until 1 o'clock this afternoon here on Talk. I will tell you about what we've got coming up in the show in just a moment's time, but we have to start this programme with some rather sad breaking news this morning. We just learned that the French actress and singer Brigitte Bardot has died at the age of 91. Of course, is incredibly famous star, arguably one of the best exports from France. Career, goodness me, I mean, where did we start? Sort of the films Viva Maria and so many others that people knew her for. And what can I say? Just another icon has left us. So that is the sad news that Brigitte Bardot has died at the age of 91. OK, let us tell you what is coming up on today's show, though. And of course, I'm sure that we will be paying tribute at some point to Brigitte later in the programme. But coming up today, Sir Keir Starmer, Prime Minister, is very much under fire after welcoming a British Egyptian activist by the name of Alaa Abd El Fattah back into the UK. Now, I'm sure that you were hearing this just before with Kev on Breakfast. Now, this is a figure whose past posts on social media have praised violence and have ultimately sparked criticism from opposition politicians and indeed from Jewish groups as well, based on the fact that that he has said some pretty abhorrent things against the Jewish community and indeed against Israel. Also today, though, we're going to be looking at a story that Christopher Biggins, that well-loved actor, has been speaking out about crime and punishment. Yes, you did hear me correctly. Christopher Biggins has been speaking out about this. He has called for return of the death penalty for murder, while sharing his thoughts also on modern society and law enforcement as well. And also something in the way of a bit of a dramatic turn of events is that a group of trans activists allegedly plotted criminal damage against senior political officers, including that of the Prime Minister and Wes Streeting. So they've ultimately forced police and security services to take notice and to take action. So all of that and much more we're going to be speaking about, but in particular for you, I want you to tell me about the death penalty. I want you to tell me whether or not you think, has Christopher Biggins got a point? Is it potentially a good idea to bring back the death penalty for the crime of murder? Because, I mean, if I was to share with you where I stand on this, which I believe me will happily do, I absolutely agree with him. I have long thought that on many levels it is so wrong that capital punishment was ever abolished, because like many punishments, it's a deterrent. And when you remove that deterrent, all that happens is people think they've got carte blanche to almost do whatever the heck they want if they think there aren't going to be the consequences. I get the counter argument that people are going to turn around and say, well, hang on a second, they've had the death penalty in America for years. It doesn't stop people committing those kind of crimes there. But I tell you one thing for nothing. I think American taxpayers have the last laugh, because I bet you anything they don't spend as much money on lifers as we do. Just saying. 0344 499 1000. If you want to get involved in that conversation, I'd very much like to hear from you this morning. What do you think about this? Do you agree with Christopher Biggins? Should the death penalty be brought back into British society as a punishment for those who commit murder? 0344 499 1000 is the phone number. That's the same number you need to contact us on if you want to send a WhatsApp message, and it is also the same number if you want to send a voice note. If you are going to send a voice note, all I ask is you keep it under a minute, please. That'd be great. And then for the good old-fashioned SMS, feel free to text 87222. Just remember to start your message with the word talk. Right, okay, let's crack on. Now, joining me in the studio for this hour, I'm very pleased to say that Matthew Goodwin-Freeman, who's Conservative councillor, is in the studio. Matthew, a very good morning.
Morning, Phil. Merry Christmas, or whatever
And
these days
you.
between Christmas and New Year's are supposed to be called.
Well, do you know, someone said to me the other day, I'd never heard this before, Merry Boxing Day. I didn't even know that was a thing.
I don't
anyway,
think
so. Well, who only knows? And we're also joined now down the line by the sensational James Ball, political editor of The New World. Good morning to you, James.
Good morning.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us, both of you. James, let's start off with you, because I want to get your thoughts on some of the stories that we're all waking up to this morning. And in particular, this one about Starmer and his open arms, for want of a better term, towards Alaa Abd El Fattah. Of course, this is this chap who many would describe as something in the way of an extreme sort of individual, but saying he was delighted after the activist arrived from Egypt on Friday night, once a travel ban was lifted following UK government lobbying. Do you think that this is a good look for the Prime Minister to welcome such, what many might say is an abhorrent figure?
I don't think it's a good look. I think it is a reminder that people are complicated, though. Alaa Abd El Fattah has done some really impressive human rights campaigning in Egypt. He spoke out very correctly against imprisonment and torture of dissidents there, and ended up imprisoned and tortured for his efforts. And I think it's good that successive UK governments campaigned for his freedom. He's got a wife and a child here. He's got a connection to the UK. I think trying to get him free, it was right for the Conservative government to do it. It was right for the Labour government to do it. I think so enthusiastically cheering it on when his views are awful.
Yeah.
And he does, some of his tweets are absolutely indefensible. I think that crosses a line. You don't have to adopt all of his positions to campaign for his freedom.
No, but at the same time, I would have thought that someone loses the right for the UK government to intervene and to fight for their freedom when they openly call for the killing of Zionists. I'm a Zionist, so he obviously wishes me dead. That's nice. Also, the open chanting of killing of civilians, the police, racist language against white people. This sounds like a really rather abhorrent individual to me, and I'm really quite annoyed that the UK government even thinks it's remotely acceptable to start defending, let alone actually fighting for his freedom. I would wish him to rot away, to be honest.
I think if we're going to start to push against freedom of speech and say the state should only stand up for us in certain circumstances, that could go quite badly.
There's a great difference between freedom of speech and inciting violence, James.
Yes, but none of us agree where that is. Lots of us think that, there's lots of disagreement about where violence lies. And I think if you start saying that, we should leave people to be, with a connection to the country, to be tortured in foreign jails if they have bad views, imagine.
But he's got a connection to Egypt, so let him stay in Egypt.
Imagine who left-wingers would go for. I think, tortured in a foreign prison is a sentence a bit more severe than I would like for this. I think we should look at those, we should condemn them, we should sort of, there is no need to endorse those. And that's why I think some of the tweets and the posts from Starmer celebrating the return were quite odd. But I say people post things that make, we've got laws that govern hate speech. We should look at whether these should be punished on those. I don't think we should say, if you post things that we don't like or we think cross the line, I don't care if you're tortured in... I don't think we should say you should be tortured in foreign jail. I think that's quite against British values, is it not?
I think it's also very much against British values to call for the killing of people just because they happen to support a very democratic country. However, I've also got Matthew Goodwin-Freeman, who's also in the studio, so we'll get you, I can see you're chomping at the bit. We'll get your reaction in just a moment to that, I promise you. But one of the other stories I want to cover with you, James, is that Labour Party has suggested that they're going to impose a visa crackdown for countries that refuse to deport migrants. So they've said that there's visa restrictions, for example, on the Democratic Republic of the Congo for refusing to take back deported migrants, marking the first use of the powers introduced in 2022 to penalise non-cooperating countries. Is this a step in the right direction for potentially tackling the migrant crisis?
Yes, I think it's a reasonable step, and I think it shows that there are quite a lot of options we can do without having to attack human rights, without having to do things like that. And it surprises me it's taken this long. These things are international negotiations. Negotiations are about leverage. If you want countries to accept returns, and that's vital for deportations to work, you're going to have something to lever against them. So it's completely unfair for people caught up in the visa system, but that's how pressure works, that's how leverage works, that's how negotiation works. This is a good step, I think.
You see, I think it's hilarious that you say it's unfair for people caught up in the visa system. I just look at this as it's unfair to British citizens, British tax-paying citizens whose money goes on these kind of efforts. And I would argue that I can't understand for the life of me why we just don't turn around and say, this is Britain, this is our country. If we don't want someone here, you are being deported. We're not going to ask permission to deport someone to the country of origin they come from. If we can categorically prove it, which I do appreciate in many cases we can't through paperwork, because many, as we know, of these so-called asylum seekers just chuck their papers into the sea and hope for the best. But what we could do is we could easily say through genetics where someone comes from, but we won't do that because that's against human rights. What about the human rights of the taxpayer who has to spend an absolute damn fortune on these cretinous individuals? I don't want negotiations with countries. As far as I'm concerned, if someone does not belong in Britain, kick them out of Britain.
So when I say it's unfair on the people get the visas aren't the same as the people getting deported. So let's say we want to take a doctor from the DRC, probably unlikely, but it happens.
No, I get that completely. And so please explain it. I do understand what you mean, though.
Deport someone. So, it's we're only giving visas where we want that person or that skill in already. So it's not ideal. I agree. It does seem mad that you need the permission of a country to send someone back to it. But this is how sort of international travel, how international treaty works. Countries don't have to accept anyone coming in. They get to control their borders in the same way that nominally we do. And so it does seem silly that the DRC can it does seem silly the DRC can refuse returns. It does seem silly other countries can do it. But that's how international law works, and we have to work and pressure within that.
But of course, international law...
I'm not sure how it works if we just fly people and they sit in an airport, without the country letting them in.
But you see, the thing is, James,
international
law, of course, is an agreement. It's an understanding between nations that, technically speaking, it is just that. It's an agreement. So it's actually quite misleading when they say it's international law, because you're not going to throw a country in prison for breaching international law, OK? It's just not done. It's not the thing. There may be ramifications of some sort of sanctions, but hey, look, whatever. You know, the UK is quite a strong country. I think we can afford to risk sanctions from, for example, the DRC. But what I would suggest is that if a country is going to break international law themselves, then why on earth should we have to respect it, and why should we follow it? For allowing people to sort of to break borders and just to do whatever the heck they want in the first place. I do get the whole argument, by the way, about sort of visa applications are totally separate. I'm sorry I didn't make that clearer. You are, of course, quite right. Someone who is applying for a visa is not the same as someone who's claiming for asylum. But my point being is that I don't really care sort of who it affects. All I care about, and this is what all our government should care about, is British taxpayers. That's all we should be worried about.
I think what they're doing here is in the interest of British taxpayers, though. This is a step to try. This is a level of negotiation we haven't had a go at, sort of threatening the visas and making that a quid pro quo for returns. Let's see it. Let's see if this works. It's a step we haven't taken before. If it doesn't, then maybe we have to look at things more drastic to increase that pressure. But as it is, you know, why go from 0 to 100? Let's go to 30 and see if that works.
I wished I thought it was even 30, but sadly most of the lefties would support 20. Anyway, right, Farage, I'll strip pensions from civil servants who let in foreign rapists. So this is Nigel Farage, obviously leader of Reform UK, has pledged to strip civil servants of their pensions if they are found responsible for allowing sex offender migrants into the UK. He's got a point, hasn't he?
I mean, he does, but it's a little bit like Corbyn had a point when he said it'd be nice to have free internet. I mean, sure, fine, it sounds good, whatever. You know, I don't want foreign rapists let in. If someone's been grossly negligent, sort it. But it does feel like one of those, I think voters are a bit cleverer than this. I think they know he's sort of, if you can prove that they've been completely negligent, you could kick them out now. If they haven't, if it's that a minister hasn't bought the right IT system or we don't have the deal in place, feels a bit convenient to let the minister off the hook and throw an official under the bus, doesn't it?
Don't get me started with what I think should happen to the ministers, I promise you, but, you know, make no mistake. But let's not overlook the fact that many times civil servants do almost, should I say, get away with it because people are so focused on ministers.
I think it's a bit of an applause line. You know, sure, does he have a plan for doing this? Does he have criteria? Then great. But I think he just wants a headline about civil servants and foreign rapists.
Yeah, and actually, James, this may shock you. I actually agree with you on that. And I tell you for why, is because I was doing a bit of research into this because I was chatting with Ted, who's producing this fine extravaganza before the show started. And I actually said, just thinking out loud, I said, I don't understand sort of how he could achieve this when there are such strict laws in place to protect pensions, especially if you consider it wasn't that long ago that pension reforms were introduced where companies actually have to encourage their employees to opt out of pensions if they don't want companies to pay into them. So actually there are some really strict laws surrounding corporate pension, but actually even stricter laws surrounding public sector pensions. So I don't even know how he's going to achieve this, to be honest.
Exactly that. I just look at it and go, he wants a headline, he wants to look tough, and it's fine. He's good at that game, but I do think people cotton onto it, and I think he needs to be careful not to play this trick too often. It sounds fine, it sounds good. I've got no complaint with the theory. I just don't think he actually has any plans to do it.
OK. Let's move on to another story. Now, this is Sir Keir Starmer is apparently under pressure from trade unions to reconsider Labour's pledge not to rejoin the EU Customs Union. So Paul Nowak, as General Secretary of the Trades Union Congress, the TUC, has urged the Prime Minister to pressure the closest possible economic relationship with the EU. I strongly suspect you and I probably have a very different stance when it comes to Brexit, but what I would like to know is whether or not you think that there could be some arrangement that would benefit the UK without having to adopt all of the abhorrent laws that come with the EU.
This is about sort of friction on sending goods. This isn't about free movement of people. It's not about a rejoin.
Not at the moment, it's not.
It's not, but it is possible to have a customs union without having membership. When we're looking at these deals, we should look at options on the table. How much would they deliver for Britain? How much would they help us export? How much would they help our trade? And I think people are getting increasingly about this. I think they're looking for this list of benefits on new trading partners, and they're not materialising. You know, the Australia deal that was completely celebrated by a lot of the Brexit media is now, I saw in the headlines yesterday, being condemned because, of course, it's bringing in a lot more Australian meat and our farmers are having to compete with yet more people. So if we look at this...
Yes, because Labour are so on the side of farmers, aren't they?
Well, look, they've got a mixed record there. I will not say otherwise. But if the spreadsheet comes and says this would deliver for Britain and it isn't putting us back in the EU without a public mandate, I think we should have it on the table. I think it looks simpler when you've got all of your nearby trading partners in the EU. You know, trade is a matter of how far away are the goods. When you're shipping goods, we need to be able to do it with minimum checks, minimum hassle, minimum bureaucracy.
That just doesn't sound like the EU
like the
to me.
Customs Union. Well, we've only increased it by going, unfortunately. There's just not another set of neighbours. There's not another set of countries on our doorstep. All of our neighbours are in the EU. That means we are always going to have to deal with the EU, and all we can do is change the terms under which we do it. And so far, all we've really accomplished with Brexit is making it more bureaucratic, more, slower and more expensive. And, you talk to small business owners and most of them have given up on exporting. And that's just a shame. You've got a load of good British goods, good British sort of things made, and we can't sell them out anymore. And I think that's bad.
And I don't blame Britain for that. James, very quickly, just one line, if you would be so kind. Christopher Biggins is in the news today, of course, the much-loved British actor, because he has said, amongst many other things, and he was talking to The Telegraph, that he thinks that Britain should reintroduce the death penalty for those who commit murder. Is he right?
Look, he's completely entitled to his opinion, but I'm about as interested in Christopher Biggins' take on the death penalty as I am on how to play Widow Twankey, But
I am interested in what your take is, James. So do you think that he has a point when he says that?
I'm against it. I grew up with a Catholic background, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. And look, I look at how many mistakes civil servants, judges, the justice system makes. If someone's in prison, you can reverse it. If someone's dead, you can't. So I disagree with him. If
someone's in prison, it costs a fortune. If someone's been proven with DNA testing that they absolutely categorically carried out a murder, would you then be in favour of it?
No. As I say, I've grown up with a background against it. But, it's a live debate. I just think we can never be that certain. We've seen cases where everyone was absolutely sure and it turned out wrong. I just think life's long. I think we have to accept the cost of jail. Murders are going down as well. We have a low crime rate. Britain is a safe country. We don't need
Britain is a safe country. Well, it hides it well. James Ball, I'm so sorry we do have to leave it there, but political editor of The New World, I really appreciate you talking to me this morning. Thank you very much indeed. I promise you, Matthew Goodwin-Freeman, we will get your reaction in just a moment's time. He's chomping at the bit here. He's going to hit me if I'm not careful. But we've got, before the break, a quick voice note from Kelvin on the death penalty.
Good morning, Dave. Hope you had a good Christmas. The death penalty. Yeah, good question. But the answer should be yes. Because with technology today and all the video evidence, DNA evidence and all that lot, can't really go wrong, can they? So, yeah, bring it back. And anybody that's caught carrying knives should be a 15-year stretch just for carrying. And you won't have to worry about if they use it because they probably won't carry one anyway. So the sentences need to be tougher on everything, and you've only got to listen to what's going on right now, like David Williams. The media, his trials by media, they've found him guilty. He hasn't even been into court yet, and yet they're banning him and everything, which is wrong. What happened to being going to court and, going through all that? It's ridiculous. Bye.
Well, thank you very much indeed for that, Kelvin. I've completely overlooked the fact that you've called me Dave. Of course, Dave is the surname. Make no mistake, I am Phil Dave, but I appreciate your thoughts all the same. 0344 499 1000 if you want to send a voice note, because here at Talk, your opinion matters. More from you and from Matthew Goodwin-Freeman right after this.
2026. It's going to be the only way to start your day. It's the home of common sense. It's where the nation can come to speak about the day's news. It's the Jeremy Kyle Breakfast Show. You know who you are. You get up, you graft, you work hard. I'm here for you. We want to hear your side. Promise you one thing. It is where the nation can and will come to talk. The Jeremy Kyle Breakfast Show, weekdays from 6 a.m.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning to you. This is indeed Talk. It's 27 minutes past the hour of 10 o'clock, and this is Phil Dave in for Peter Cardwell with you until 1 o'clock this afternoon here on the home of common sense, where very much it's a case of your opinion matters. Let's read through some of the messages in the company of Conservative councillor Matthew Goodwin-Freeman, who's also here. So, Matthew, I'd be interested to get your reactions to this.
Absolutely.
Talking earlier on about the death penalty, this is because the well-loved actor Christopher Biggins has called for the death penalty to be reintroduced. Yes, you heard me right. Actor Christopher Biggins has asked for the death penalty to be reintroduced on the basis that someone carries out the crime of murder. And this is from Bob in Aberdeen, who says, "Hi Phil, I'm in favour of the death penalty. When it was scrapped, we were promised by the great and the good that anyone convicted of killing would spend the rest of their lives in prison. As usual, we were conned to achieve their liberal ideals." This one comes from Amanda in London. While I agree with the death penalty, unfortunately there are those in certain communities living amongst us who glorify and welcome death after the country, I think. So-called leaders like Starmer and co should be arrested for the harm that they have done and no doubt intend to do so. Thank you for that, Amanda. And good morning to Tracy, who says, "I'm totally in agreement with the death penalty with murderers we are totally sure of, i.e. the vile Southport murderer." Absolutely. So yeah, that's exactly my point, Matthew.
Yep.
Is I think that we have enough in this day and age, technology-wise, from when we last had the death penalty in this country. Things such as DNA testing, CCTV, for goodness sake, people recording on their phones,
Exactly.
all of these things, like, not that I hope that anyone would record something like that on their phone, but you know what I mean. Yeah. We have more than enough that we can use now as evidence, and what I can't understand, if it's good enough evidence to convict someone to be in prison for how many years, why is it not good enough to convict them for the death penalty?
You're completely right. The biggest argument against bringing in the death penalty is, oh, well, what if you do something, what if you convict the wrong person? Yeah. Back when we had the death penalty, I think the last person to be convicted of death penalty was, in the end, found to have been innocent afterwards. But that was then. As you say, DNA technology, fingerprint technology, CCTV, the advent of the internet, location services on people's phones and technology. There is so much more data that we can be using nowadays. And I completely agree. Who wants to be paying, I think it's £50,000 to keep a criminal behind bars in the UK per year?
Yeah.
Who wants to be paying that for someone who is going to spend the rest of their lives behind bars, are never going to contribute to society again? It would be a saving for the country and a saving for people's safety if we reintroduce the death penalty, which I am all in favour of. And the only thing that I will say about the criticism that, oh, you've been brought up with a Christian background, you shouldn't be in favour of things like the death penalty.
You're referring to what James Ball, who's political editor of the New World, was
I
saying
was brought up in a Christian background. I can understand the point, but I was also brought up wanting to look after my neighbour and keep people safe.
Absolutely,
and I would
love
not,
thy neighbour, for goodness sake.
I mean, Axel Rudabakana, the Southport murderer, absolutely should not be spending the rest of his life behind bars in Britain, paid for by us, where we've seen he's poured boiling water, boiling oil on police officers in jail. These sorts of people should not be around. They need to have the death penalty reintroduced.
What I find so completely staggering is that there are people who cry out against the death penalty because they believe it makes them a bad person for supporting it. But what I put to those individuals who are against it is, however good your intentions are, do you not realise how bad an individual it makes you, for as long as those who are victims or families of the victims see that that person lives and breathes when their relative is 6 feet under? That makes you a terrible person, in my humble opinion, because it means you support the villain over the victim. I think it's appalling. I don't think they should be breathing the same air we do. 0344 499 1000 is the phone number. Get in touch and let me know your thoughts. That's exactly what John, who's over in France in the Dordogne, says. A very good morning to you, John.
Good morning, Phil.
John, do tell us, what are your thoughts on the death penalty? Do you think that Christopher Biggins has a point? Should it be brought back?
Oh, absolutely. I'm 100% in favour of the death penalty. I would ask if Mr. Farage is listening, sir, as soon as you become Prime Minister, can we please have a referendum on this matter? I think we'd win. I think we'd win comfortably.
Do you think we even need to bother with the idea of a referendum? Shouldn't it just be that they could potentially be elected on the promise that they'll reintroduce it?
Let's shut James Ball down.
Well, let's not, because he's not here to answer for himself. But
that's it.
I'm so sorry, John. I missed that last bit. Sorry. What did you say? Sorry. Oh, we lost John. All right, we'll get him back in a second. That's right. I think he's decided to disappear off back to France. Who knows? But, oh, no, there you are. Sorry, John. I missed your last point. Sorry, I missed your last line. Sorry. Could you just say again? Sorry.
Ball down.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So, obviously, let's not pick on James, because he's just offered his opinion. He's not here to answer for it.
No, he's against it.
Oh, no.
Right? Well, let's have a referendum, and it will decide the matter. Referendum every 20 years on something like this.
Well, as I was saying, John, that I can't help but wonder whether or not a referendum is a teensy bit of a waste of time, and maybe if actually Reform just pledged to bring it back in the first place in their manifesto, maybe that would be good enough. John, I really appreciate the thoughts. Sorry for the dodgy line if you weren't able to hear everything that John had to say. 0344 499 1000 if you want to get involved in the conversation. Basically, what John was saying is that he is all in favour of the idea of it anyway. And that's certainly what some of your messages have said this morning as well. So if you want to send a WhatsApp, you're very welcome to do so. You can send a message in using the same number, 0344 499 1000, or text to 87222, whatever you see fit. Right, we'll take some more calls and some more of your messages on everything that we're talking about, and of course get more thoughts from Matthew Goodwin-Freeman right after this. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
There you go. Right, welcome back. This is, of course, Talk. It's Phil Dave in for Peter Carwell. Don't mind me having a lovely chat in the studio with Matthew Goodwin-Freeman. I wasn't even paying attention to the break. I'm so sorry about that. Anyway, Matthew, we've been taking messages from the viewing public today about several subjects, including this. Sir Keir Starmer has welcomed Alaa Abd El Fattah to the UK, saying he was delighted after the activist arrived back from Egypt on Friday night once a travel ban was lifted following the UK government's lobbying. I do want to get your reaction to that, so think carefully on that. The other thing we've been taking thoughts on is the death penalty in particular. Christopher Biggins, the well-known and much-loved actor, has said that he thinks that the death penalty should be reintroduced to UK crime and punishment. What do you think about it? We've got a voice note here from Karen. Karen, what do you think?
I brought up with a Catholic background, so an eye for an eye, maybe. So if you murder someone, then your life gets taken. Clearly, he doesn't agree with that. There you go.
Well, thank you very much indeed for that, Karen. Yes, I must confess that having not been brought up Catholic, I might have forgotten the rather famous eye for an eye quote, but I do appreciate it all the same. Gordon has given us a call from Sutton. So, Gordon, you also want to talk about death penalty. What are your thoughts? Good morning to you.
I would go further. I'd bring it back for rape as well.
Interesting. Why do you think that, Gordon?
Well, how many women do you know that have been raped? Because I know a few. And it ruins their life.
Yeah, look, it's very hard to argue with that. I mean, I suppose that some might say that if we were going to go on the basis of what that voice note just said, an eye for an eye, would it be right to take someone's life when technically they haven't taken the life of another? Having said that, if they've ruined a life of another, is that the same as taking their life from them, more than likely?
In my opinion, it's just a male forcing his opinion and his body and his will on a woman.
Well, I mean, of course, let's not be stereotypical and say that it's not just men. Of course, there are other forms of rape as well. But
you're absolutely right.
But Gordon,
the DNA would be easy, wouldn't it?
But so you see, the problem is that I think that it's going to be a tough enough sell to convince people that for someone who's actually ended someone's life in the first instance, to then start sort of campaigning and suggesting that you then should bring back the death penalty for other crimes that do not necessarily equate in the eyes at surface value. I get completely what you mean, by the way, about ruining someone's life for good. But in terms of sort of actually trying to campaign in favour of introducing such a severe punishment for those who have not necessarily taken another life, I'm not convinced would be the easiest sell. But look, don't get me wrong, it's not going to be easy in the first place. You know, the point is...
Yeah. I understand your point fully. It's all because too many people in this country have got no conviction. I'm going to tell you what, I've got a couple of daughters, right? If someone raped one of my kids, I'd find them and kill them.
Well, look, Gordon, listen, I totally understand the anger that you would have and for saying such a thing, but of course, you know, I have to say we couldn't possibly condone that kind of behaviour and nor encourage it. I completely understand the passion, though, and totally respect the fact that you'd do anything to protect your family. I'm sure there are many people who feel the same way, but of course, I have to say, we obviously don't condone that kind of behaviour. However, Gordon, I really appreciate your call. Thank you so much. 0344 499 1000 if you want to get involved in the conversation. And Matthew, we just heard just there from Gordon in Sutton, the passion and the enthusiasm that someone has when they can relate it potentially to their own family. And I think this is where a lot of it's born out of, is that the reason why we see such lily-livered behaviour in this country is because people who are in charge can't relate to what a victim or their family has gone through.
Yeah, absolutely. Remember, the people who are in charge get private security and people walking around with them all day long, so they feel like they're in a far safer country than the rest of us, where we have to deal with getting our phone nicked every single week and things like that. Look, the fact is, why don't a political party put it in a manifesto? Then the public can vote on it. And also, we're not saying that this would be rolled out everywhere for every crime. It would be an option for the judges. So the judge can decide, yes, in the most heinous of crimes, in the worst cases, I think no other sentence is suitable than the death penalty. You could bake in some sort of automatic review where it gets reviewed by a separate judge to make sure they also think, yes, out of all the decisions you could take, it is the death penalty. That's the way that you protect this. But I think for the most serious of crimes, individuals like the Southport killer, mass terrorists, people who purely want to cause hate and harm to this country, those people should not be spending £50,000 a year of taxpayers' money behind bars. We can create a system where the death penalty can be brought in and there are checks and balances. But remember, all those who say, oh, well, what about miscarriages of justice in the past? That's in the past. We've got DNA technology, fingerprint technology, CCTV, location technology, all these sorts of things. There is no reason now not to be doing this.
But what I find staggering is that people cry out, and you're right about the miscarriage of justice, but what about the miscarriage of justice to the victim and the victim's families who've done nothing, absolutely nothing, to warrant losing a loved one?
Exactly.
They should not be the ones punished here. It's the one carrying out the crime should be sorry, wiped off the face of the planet. I don't want them anywhere near me and breathing the same air. Right, before I get saying something that I probably shouldn't, have a couple more voice notes on this, and then we're going to change direction slightly. This is from Pete on the death penalty.
Good morning, Phil. Nice to see you presenting again. Always find your presenting very, very good, especially when that Jonathan Diss is on. I enjoyed your taking him down last week. But onto the subject of death penalty. Yes, when the death penalty can be proven, such as in cases like the Stockport deaths where that terrorist went on to murder all them small little girls, definitely, when it can be proven beyond all doubt, yes. When it can't be proven beyond all doubt, then life imprisonment should mean life imprisonment behind bars until the day they die unless proved innocent. And while they're in prison, it should be no luxuries. They're there for a punishment. They're not there for rehabilitation if they're in there for life. They are in there for life. So what's the point of rehabilitation?
I find it impossible to argue with anything you've said, Pete. Thank you very much indeed. I do apologise for my childish outburst during that, but that did amuse me. Sorry. This is from Nick on the death penalty.
Good morning, Phil. It's Nick from Loughborough. I am wholly against the reintroduction of the death penalty. History is littered with cases of miscarriages of justice and people sent to the gallows for crimes they did not commit. And if there is this chance that one person is sent to their death for doing nothing, for not committing a murder, not committing a crime, then the death penalty certainly should never be reintroduced. Have a good day, Phil.
Thank you very much indeed for that, Nick. Well, as I say, what about the miscarriage of justice against the victim and the victim's families? That's the way I look at it. This is from Hev, who's on the death penalty as well.
Good morning, Phil. It's Heath from Kent. The death penalty, sometimes I think yes, sometimes I think no. I know you say about DNA, but people are very cluey and they can plant DNA. It is a difficult one. It's a very difficult one. Even if somebody actually pleads guilt, you know, they might be doing it for the wrong reason. But I do believe in hard labour. Hard labour, get these people working and stop them being entertained in prison, being, you know, just, oh, for God's sake, you know, get them doing something useful for this country.
I understand what you're saying, Hev, truly. And when you talk about people planting DNA, I get that, but I still stand by that if we have such little faith in the justice system, why do we punish anyone? Right? Because at the end of the day, the death penalty is the punishment. It's not the path taken to reach the conclusion of the verdict. It's at the end of the day, once the verdict has been proven, the punishment should fit the crime. And I reckon it just doesn't at the moment. What do you think, Matthew?
Well, I think one thing that came out of those calls is the soft touch we are when people do end up in jail. We've all seen the photos and videos of them having Xboxes and smuggling in phones every single day, drug parties and all these sorts of things. That is a massive problem that we need to clamp down on in our jails. So I agree. I think the point is death penalty can be added as an option for the judge in the most serious of cases. You can bake in an automatic review or something like that. But I must say to Pete, when he says life is life and the punishment should fit the crime, I mean, Pete, you're spot on there. In my government, he could be a Home Secretary, I think.
Change of direction coming your way in just a moment. We will carry on taking your thoughts and your messages as well. 0344 499 1000 is the phone number. If indeed you do want to get in touch and tell me whether or not you think the death penalty should be reintroduced. Coming up in just a moment's time, Transgender Activist Group has apparently, this is Bashback they're called, is allegedly planning a series of criminal attacks on offices of senior politicians, including the Prime Minister and the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting. That's according to the Mail on Sunday. We'll be looking at that story and getting your reaction as well. 0344 499 1000. Don't go anywhere. Your opinion matters. This is Talk.
2026. It's going to be the only way to start your day. It's the home of common sense. It's where the nation can come to speak about the day's news. It's the Jeremy Kyle Breakfast Show. You know who you are. You get up, you graft, you work hard. I'm here for you. We want to hear your side. Promise you one thing. It is where the nation can and will come to talk. The Jeremy Kyle Breakfast Show, weekdays from 6 a.m.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, this is indeed Talk. It's Phil Dave in for Peter Cardwell with you until 1 o'clock this afternoon. Right, spoke to you briefly about this before the break there, but trans activists have been found to potentially be planning to attack the offices of senior politicians, including the Prime Minister and the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting. That is according to the Mail on Sunday. And frankly, although it might have been thwarted, it is going to show that this problem with trans activists clearly doesn't seem to be going away anywhere anytime soon. So now let's get the thoughts of former NHS nurse at the Tavistock and commentator, the New Culture Forum, Amy Gallagher joins us. Amy, good morning.
Good morning.
Amy, this is slightly disconcerting to think that anyone could believe that regardless of your political opinion, or one's political opinion I should say, that it's in any way acceptable to plan to attack the offices of an official.
Yeah, particularly given the fact that these extremists, these transgender activists, are targeting the Labour government. Now, we know that the Labour government have been very transgender rights. A lot of them for a long time refused to define what a woman was, instead opting for a kind of more nuanced position and not wanting to go along with the gender critical view. Wes Streeting himself, who they targeted in July, graffitiing his constituency, calling him a child killer because he banned puberty blockers. They're still targeting him, even though he's actually trying to give them what they want. He's proposing a clinical trial for puberty blockers. So it just, for me, it seems for this particular group of people, nothing is enough. Nothing will stop them. It's outrageous that someone like Wes Streeting, who based on evidence, banned a drug because it wasn't evidence-based and showed that there was a lot of side effects with puberty blockers. Because of that banning, they're calling him a child killer and they're still targeting him now. So my question is, what do these people actually want? Because to me, it seems as though nothing would be enough. As I understand it, they're calling for total transgender liberation. Now, what is that? What does that look like? To me, that would mean they want complete control over the whole of society, to implicate their ideology over the whole of society, and they will not stop. So it is very concerning, and I have to say, although I think it's outrageous the way they're targeting Wes Streeting and other Labour officials, they have brought this on themselves because they have not stood up to this ideology. They're very happy to come out and brand people as far-right thugs and talk about the far-right extremism. When do they ever come out and talk about far-left extremism? This is what this is. It's far-left thuggery, but you will never hear them say that.
Amy, you've literally taken the words out of my mouth, because the very next point I was going to make to you is this is on them as far as I'm concerned, because they have done nothing at any step of the way, and even to some degree the Conservatives beforehand, when they were in power for the last 14 years that they were in office, to some degree, never did enough to stamp this nonsense out once and for all and say, do you know what? No, you're talking nonsense. This is not okay. You are the ones, not you, Amy, them, the activists, are the ones who are abusive towards children for their stupid, I'm not even going to say liberal ideology, because to be honest with you, I actually think liberalism can be quite reasonable at times, but this is not. This is way beyond. This is extremist behaviour from the left who just want to pick a fight because, frankly, they can't be bothered to go and get a job.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you look at the protests that happened after the Supreme Court ruling that sex in the Equality Act means biological sex, there was about 25,000 transgender activists in London. Now, some of them were graffitiing statues, some of them are urinating on statues, some of them are holding up placards saying decapitate TERFs, calling for the death of J.K. Rowling. Now, there was not a single arrest that day of any of those protesters, even though their rhetoric was, to me, hate speech. It was calling for violence. And the Labour Party, what did they do? Which MP came out and spoke about how outrageous it was that with the behaviour that we were seeing after the Supreme Court ruling? Nobody did. So as you say, I don't. They have absolutely brought this on themselves, the Labour Party, and they're going to have to stand up to these people at some point because they are turning on them now.
Yeah, it really beggars belief, because to tell you the truth, I can't understand why someone would see, you mentioned some of those revolting acts that those protesters carried out, including disrespecting statues. I don't care if someone doesn't like a statue, for goodness sake. I'm fairly sure that there'll be some countries in the world that would have a statue of Adolf Hitler. As someone who's Jewish, I abhor the guy, but at the same time, I wouldn't go round doing something to that statue just because I fundamentally disagree with someone who was such a vile figure from history. But even the people who are not vile figures from history, certainly not to the masses anyway, these are the kind of statues these individuals are targeting. They're spray painting government ministers' properties as if they think that's somehow acceptable. These are criminals. They're ardent criminals who, as far as I'm concerned, we shouldn't be kowtowing to. We should be locking them up.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the statues they targeted was the statue of Millicent Fawcett, so someone that historically campaigned for women's rights. I mean, we hear a lot of rhetoric from this government about misogyny and about standing up to sexism, but there is a lot of sexism and misogyny from the transgender activism towards feminists, towards women, towards lesbians, but you will never hear the Labour government speak up about that. And why? Why not? Because, as you say, this is totally unacceptable behaviour in any form. You know, I don't care what, if it's a statue that I don't like, I don't think it should have graffiti on it. That's still criminal damage, irrespective of what I think about the person. So there is a complete two-tier policing happening with this issue, and has been for a very long time. And that has absolutely emboldened them. And that's where we're at this stage.
Yeah, totally and utterly. I couldn't agree with you more if I tried. Right, I also want to get your thoughts, Amy, on this story as well, that the NHS is continuing to allow transgender patients and staff to access single-sex spaces in English hostels, despite the Supreme Court ruling that women in the Equality Act refers to biological sex. What is wrong with everyone? Why can't we stand up? How is this okay?
Yeah, I mean, it's been amazing. It's been 8 months since the Supreme Court ruling, and the NHS up and down the country, hospitals are just absolutely defying this ruling, and it just shows you how entrenched this ideology is in the NHS. Even when there is a clear, a law is made, the Supreme Court ruling come out and say this, the NHS just does not want to hear it. They're putting their hands over their ears and they don't want to know. A lot of them are saying they're waiting for the Equality and Human Rights Commission to give their guidance. We know that Bridget Phillipson has that guidance, but she's stalling on acting on it.
Another person who, despite being the Minister for Women and what have you, she actually still is terrified of the trans movement.
Exactly. So they have this guidance. They could sort out all this confusion, but they don't want to because they know it's going to cause division between the trans lobby within the Labour Party. And what it means is that NHS, particularly women working in the NHS, there's just this continued level of confusion. So you have NHS hospitals who still have old guidance where they talk about transgender rights, non-binary rights, and then you have the Supreme Court ruling. So as a woman, you're thinking, well, the policy says this, but the Supreme Court have said this. So am I allowed a single-sex space or not? And basically, nobody knows. So it's just chaos at the moment. And it is something that they could clear up very, very quickly. And what's going to happen is there's going to just be more and more lawsuits, unfortunately. It comes down to staff having to take legal action, which is incredibly stressful. We've seen in the case of the
time-consuming and costly as well.
Exactly, time-consuming. We've seen it in the case of Sandy Peggy, the Darlington nurses, a nurse called Jennifer Melee. These are all nurses working on the front line, and they're having to take legal action because they were being forced to, in a changing room with a man, or they were being told to use certain pronouns and whatnot. And, we just need to clear this up. We just need to be clear. I don't see why single-sex spaces for women is so difficult. It's not offensive to transgender women or transgender people. You know, I'm sure NHS hospitals can offer a changing room for them that's separate. But at the moment, if you're a woman in the NHS, it's just you just don't know what the rules are, and it needs clearing up.
Do you know what? I actually think it's very simple. You said no one knows what's going on. I actually think it's terribly simple. If you're born a biological male, if you're born a biological woman, stick to your respective changing rooms. Life was so much simpler in those days, was it not?
Yeah, exactly. But what's happening, if you look at, for example, the case of Sandy Peggy, the NHS Fife where she worked, they told the male doctor who says he's a woman or identifies as a transgender woman that he was allowed, because he's a transgender woman, even though he's biologically male, he is allowed to use the female space. Now, Sandy Peggy wasn't told that. So what they did when they said that is they effectively rendered the female changing room a mixed changing room, because they're saying actually a biological man could also use this if he says he feels like he's a woman. So what that means is that the policy has changed. So they don't have a single sex space for a woman. So arguably, you know, it's very difficult. It then puts the woman in a very difficult position, because she can't say, well, this is a single sex space, you're not allowed in, because the policy has changed it. So, I mean, as you say, this is, you're taking what should be the most simplest thing imaginable. There's a place.
It's basic biology. It's honestly, it's not like it's rocket science. This is what frustrates me.
It's amazing. And what's amazing to me is that this is being played out in the NHS. If you are an NHS professional, a doctor, a nurse, a physiotherapist, you will all, as your core module, study biology. It's the absolute basis of medicine and healthcare. So the fact so the fact that you've got all these healthcare professionals who all have studied biology, who know the importance of biological reality, and yet in terms of their policies around single-sex changing rooms, we've all got to pretend, actually, we don't know what biology is. It's just a complete contradiction. It's absolutely insane.
It really is. Amy Gallagher, former NHS nurse at Tavistock and a commentator, and as well as their New Culture Forum. Thank you very much indeed for talking to us this morning. I really appreciate it. Matthew Goodwin-Freeman, a Conservative councillor, is still here. Lorraine has WhatsApped us to say the trans activists have been taught by Keir Starmer that violence gets results. Keir recognised the state of Palestine after terrorists killed civilians. Lorraine's kind of got a point, hasn't she?
Yeah, if these trans activists go around smashing up politicians' offices because they don't want to take part in the debate and democracy of this country, then they should be arrested, prosecuted and frankly put behind bars. It is all about biology, where you're born with an XX chromosome or an XY chromosome. That's the way it should be. The fact that the NHS can't even get that right is a real concern, when they should be focusing on fixing the arms and broken bones and things like that. But let's not forget, the transgender movement is a tiny population, 0.5% of the country, 262,000
I actually
people.
think it is something like 0.0025%. I'm fairly sure the last time I looked up that was it.
Regardless,
ridiculous.
it is a vocal minority,
Absolutely.
not the silent majority. So why don't the rest of us go, yeah, do you know what?
Shush.
You guys sort your problems out, shush. We're going to focus on getting on with the rest of the country, because we are all bending over backwards for the tiny minorities, when the rest of us are fed up to the back teeth of hearing this debate go on and on again and again. Kemi Badenoch said it, politicians have said it, a man is a man, a woman is a woman, and I don't care what bathroom you use, just get out of my one.
I would strongly suggest that there'd be many people who would struggle to argue with that. Thank you very much indeed for now, Matthew Goodwin-Freeman. You're going to stick with us. We're going to get more from you in just a moment's time. In the meantime, coming up in just a moment's time, Claire Purcell's going to be joining us, former Conservative government advisor to the Home Office. She will be offering her thoughts on the top stories of the day as well. And also, I want to hear from you. So get in touch and let us know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000 is Christopher Biggins right when he says we should reintroduce the death penalty. This is Talk.
Libya has become a major transit route for refugees and migrants from sub-Saharan Africa, and many of them come through Libya dreaming of getting to the UK, particularly from Sudan, where there has been a civil war waging for the last 2 years. And those asylum seekers or economic migrants who make it from Sudan to the UK have a 99% chance of being given leave to remain. So I spent several hours talking to immigration chiefs here in Benghazi on the east side of Libya. The Libyan National Army has a very good grip on the immigration problem, albeit fighting against a huge crisis with limited resources. There is a very, very clear process of giving people proper health checks, the life-saving care that they need, and then working out where it is exactly that they've come from. Their message to the UK is that you are fueling this problem. You are effectively advertising a great new life for people from sub-Saharan Africa. They actually said, you know, what do you think happens when a guy from Sudan comes up through Libya and makes his way all the way to the UK and gets put in a luxurious hotel and provided with everything? And make no mistake, it is a perilous journey. We see it from the end point. We see the Channel crossing as the dangerous bit. But actually where these journeys begin is in the hot desert. Many, many tens of kilometres have to be covered on foot by these migrants. And as many as 1 in 4 do not make it. That means bodies in the desert. The Libyan authorities are having to recover bodies in the desert. About the UK and how much awareness. Please understand the scale of what we are dealing with here with very, very limited resources. Once again, you know, people come in from charities, from NGOs, they use warm words, and the authorities here told me the only thing that we ever get is maybe a few toothbrushes and some nappies for the babies.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good morning to you. It is 3 minutes past 11 o'clock on Saturday. It's on Sunday even, the 28th of December 2025. I'm getting my days muddled up here. Don't mind me. This is Phil Dave in Fort Peter Cardwell with you until 1 o'clock this afternoon. Thank you very much indeed for the pleasure of your company. Still loads more to come in the next couple of hours. We're going to be looking again at this story of Sir Keir Starmer being under fire because he has welcomed a British-Egyptian activist by the name of Alaa Abd El Fattah back to the UK, a figure whose past posts on social media have included praising violence against Zionists, the police, and being racist towards, white people. He's sparked criticism from opposition politicians and Jewish groups alike. Also today, Christopher Biggins has been doing an interview with the Daily Telegraph. He's spoken out about crime and punishment, and he in particular has called for the return of the death penalty for murder. Yes, you heard me. Beloved actor Christopher Biggins has said he supports the idea of the return of the death penalty for murder, whilst also sharing his thoughts on modern society and law enforcement. And something in the way of dramatic story that we've just been covering. You may have heard just before the news there that a trans activist group has allegedly plotted to cause criminal damage against senior political officers, including the Prime Minister and Wes Streetings. It's forced police and security services to take action. We're getting your thoughts on all of those stories and much more. Do you think Christopher Biggins is right with what he said? Should we reintroduce the death penalty for murder? 0344 499 1000 is the phone number. Get in touch and let us know your thoughts. Would love to hear from you this morning. You can also text 87222. Just make sure that you start that message with the word talk. In the studio with me is Conservative councillor Matthew Goodwin Freeman. He's here to react to some of the stories as well. So, Matthew, let's get your thoughts on what Izzy has to say. This is a voice note on the death penalty. Good morning to you, Izzy.
Hi, Phil. You're doing a good job. Keep it up. It's Izzy from Kent here. Do you know what? I would normally totally agree with you about the death penalty. But do you know what worries me? Who's in government? Who's in government? If you've got a government like we have now that put people away for tweets, can you imagine if we had the death penalty? I don't know. I really don't know. But if it was like 100% clear who'd done it, who'd committed the murder, you could actually, someone's got it on camera, or like that hideous thing that happened with those 3 little girls, you know, someone like him, and there was absolutely no denying, then yes. But if it just came in willy-nilly, and we've got a government like this, or even a worse government, I don't know. You can't trust them, can you, Phil? All right, lovely. Happy New Year. All the tidings of joy. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much indeed for that, Izzy, and a very happy New Year to you and yours as well. I really appreciate your thoughts this morning. Matthew's kind of got a point, hasn't she? I mean, based on what we've seen with how, shall we say, nonchalant, I think is the politest way of putting it.
There's many other words we could use.
This government has proven to be, when it comes to matters pertaining to what most believe to be the law. Maybe there is something in saying that reintroducing the death penalty, certainly at this point in time, not such a good idea.
Well, I would say the jury's out, but Labour are scrapping jury trials. The
jury's gone, never mind the jury's out.
Let's take it out of the politicians' hands. A government brings it in a manifesto saying we will reintroduce the death penalty and let the judiciary decide. Hand it to the judges as an option, just an option, not mandating it, saying you have to do it for these crimes, saying this is a tool. If you think the sentence is warranted for the crime, then use it. That's the option. Take it out of politics. Take it out of the politicians' hands. As Izzy said, trust in politicians is so low. So let a government bring it in with a mandate to say we will reintroduce the death penalty and let the judiciary decide where it is appropriate or not. You can bake in an appeal or a review to the Supreme Court, whatever you want to do. But this isn't going to be used for every single crime out there. It should be used for the most serious of crimes. The most serious ones where the consensus amongst the public is, do you know what? This person should not be spending £50,000 a year behind bars on the British taxpayer's credit card.
Matthew, for now, thank you very much indeed. Let's get the thoughts of former Conservative Government Advisor Claire Purcell, who I'm delighted to say joins us now. Claire, a very good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you so much indeed for joining us on a Sunday. I know that we normally see you throughout the week with Julia Hartley-Brewer, so it's very much appreciated that you'll take time out of your weekend for us. I want to get your thoughts on loads of stories that we're talking about this morning. Let's start off, though, with actually what we were just talking about, the reimposition of the death penalty. That's what Christopher Biggins is calling out for cases of murder. Do you think he's got a point? Should we be doing that?
It's a really interesting conversation to have, and it's quite interesting that Christopher Biggins, of all people,
I think that's it, isn't it? It's Biggins. What?
Yeah, exactly. Who's a friendly pantomime dame has come out with such a really serious comment. I'm concerned, like your voice note, Izzy said, that any government that's in will make decisions that we're not happy with. If you haven't voted in that particular government, you're going to be particularly unhappy with it, and I wouldn't trust the current government to actually come up with a decision either way on anybody right now. They seem to make decisions, change them at the drop of a hat. So I'm not in favour of bringing it back. I can understand why people call for it. Some of the crimes we see are particularly heinous, especially when there are children involved. But I don't trust any government to actually make the right decision. And I think that Matthew said, leave it to the judiciary. Well, as we've seen, we can't always trust their decision.
I was going to say, I'm not so sure I trust the judiciary either at the moment. So, yeah.
No, so we are in a really tricky position, and it also takes an incredibly long time. You have to look at America. How much time do people spend on death row? So if we're looking at the amount of money being spent, I think it's negligible whether we would save any at all.
Interesting. Thank you, Claire. Let's look at some of the other stories, though, that are making the headlines today, because it's not all about what Christopher Biggins says. Labour has said that they have imposed visa restrictions on the Democratic Republic of Congo, and that is refusing, I should say, to not take back deported migrants. So this is making first use of the powers introduced in 2022 to penalise non-cooperating countries. Is this a step in the right direction, do we think?
Yes, it absolutely is. Why should those countries receive preferential treatment for their VIPs and diplomats to come over here? Why should we have the fast-track visa system for their citizens to come over if they pay enough money when they're not going to give anything in return? And I think it's absolutely right that we use these powers, which is something the Conservative government were very strong on and had been very strong on in the past. those countries who don't have that reciprocal agreement shouldn't take any preferential treatment from the United Kingdom. It's interesting that Angola and Namibia were issued the same set of sanctions, and they have changed their systems. They are looking to take back criminals from the United Kingdom who are their own back into their country. So the Democratic Republic of Congo, I mean, I think if you have to have the name democratic in your title, then that shows what a non-democratic country you are in the first place. I think that they need to step up to this. Otherwise, we should cut off all ties with them in its entirety.
Yeah, but the thing that worries me slightly with this, and I'm not saying that it's a step in the wrong direction, I'm just not so sure I get it as being the right form of punishment, because to my mind, we want to encourage people who want to move to the UK legally to go through the visa system. So I'm all in favour of people applying for visas and then they get given the chance to sort of based on merit, whether or not they can come in here, that's right. But what I have a problem with is people who are breaking into the country illegally, and I feel like it's conflating the two somehow. So by putting sanctions on visas to a country for not taking back those who are being deported, is that not somehow blurring the lines between legal migration and illegal migration?
Well, no, you're quite right. These are two separate entities and we mustn't get them confused. And I think that the Home Office plays it's a tricky line, and everybody wants to stop the boats, quite understandably. Nobody wants people coming into the country with no right to be here. But you also have to work on the other side of it, that your visa system is the one thing you can control very quickly. If people are applying for a visa, you know who they are, you have their identity. So why shouldn't a country risk having any preferential treatment taken away from them if they're not going to take their criminals back in return? So I don't think you're wrong to be concerned, but I think you have to have more than one approach when it comes to migration, and this is particularly sensible. You need to hit those countries where it's going to hurt them.
Speaking of hitting countries where it will hurt them, let's talk about the European Union. Sir Keir Starmer is under pressure from trade unions to reconsider Labour's pledge not to rejoin the EU Customs Union. So, of course, this is Paul Nyack, who's General Secretary of the Trade Unions Congress, the TUC. He has urged the Prime Minister to pursue the closest possible economic relationship with the EU. Now, I don't know about you, I'm not necessarily anti that. What I'm anti is all of the rules and regulations that come with that.
And I think therein lies the problem. What is it that we're going to have? It's all very well for the unions to say for the responsibility of United Kingdom residents, and especially when you're looking at energy bills, for example, then closer ties with the EU are sensible. However, we voted to leave the European Union. We voted to leave that customs union, and that is what we've done. I'm not sure that Sir Keir Starmer saying we have red lines and this is one of them. I don't think any of us believe that at all, and it just doesn't surprise me that the unions have come out, because they clearly want the UK to rejoin. They clearly want the Labour government to be the vessel for us rejoining the EU, and that is not on the cards. I think that it would be such a blow to democracy. Any credibility of the United Kingdom would go down the pan, and we can't have it. So it's not going to benefit the people of the United Kingdom, especially those like myself. I have to, confess an interest. I voted to leave. I campaigned to leave. I would hate to see this come in.
You see, I can't help but feel, and even though I know that at the moment this is only growing pressure, this is not, to be fair to Starmer, he's not necessarily said that, yes, we are going to rejoin the European Union, although he has sort of implied that he wouldn't mind the idea. But I can't help but feel that this is sort of a backdoor going into the European Union, but actually using the front door. And it's so blindingly obvious that it's almost being treated like backdoor just so it throws us off the scent. They're not even subtle about this. They want us to rejoin the EU, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's always been the case. Keir Starmer has made no secret of the fact that he wished we'd remained in the European Union. But I worry that these kind of mission creeps of unions, of the message keep coming through saying we would like the UK to have just a customs union, nothing more than that. Don't worry, everybody. You get that kind of creep towards an ever closer union. And I think this is going to be one of the worst decisions. It's going to be what breaks, I think, the Prime Minister, should he look to have any closer ties.
I just want to get your thoughts, Claire, just before we bid you a good morning, on this story that came out of the Times today about Sir Keir Starmer has nominated Matthew Doyle for a peerage. So this is despite his past support for a councillor later convicted of child sex offences. So Matthew Doyle is a long-time Labour communications aide who served as Downing Street Director of Communications until March 25, so March of this year, and is set to take a seat in the House of Lords early next year. This is getting a little bit uncomfortable for some of us. So what do you think?
It is uncomfortable. When the story broke, I did look at it and think, this is not what the House of Lords should be for. And I think that the appointment system needs to be looked at properly. We need to look at how we clear people for presentation to the House of Lords. It should be a great responsibility and honour to sit there. So I think that we need to think carefully about who goes in there. We need to look carefully at their background and who they're associating with. So
well, I was going to say, I mean, I think that's actually what some people would counter to this, wouldn't they? They'd say, well, hang on, it's not Doyle himself, it's his associates. And therefore, should he be treated differently to anyone else who's nominated for a peerage off the back of that it was who he was associated with? I mean, we don't know the details. Did he sort of know, didn't he know? Times say that he did after, and he was still championing him. But I don't know whether or not sort of is that enough in this day and age, just because someone happens to stand by someone, to say, no, personally, gut instinct tells me I don't want this kind of individual anywhere near the House of Lords.
And I think that is what we need to decide as a country. What is it that we would consider to be the correct person? We have all been around an awful lot of people during our lifetime, especially in the kind of work that you and I undertake. You come across an awful lot of people. I'm sure that in people's past, there are going to be things that would get linked to me eventually, but I may have only met that person once. So I think we need to be a little bit careful, a little bit circumspect. And also, I believe that Matthew Doyle has denied any knowledge of any wrongdoing. So it's one of those cases, we don't know the details. We have to be extremely careful not to tar somebody with that brush. But I do think that it makes us want the House of Lords to be a little bit more transparent in the process that it uses to clear people.
Just to be absolutely clear, Doyle has said that he regrets supporting Morton and that Morton was maintaining his innocence at the time. But Doyle has also said he hasn't seen Morton for years. Claire Purcell, former Conservative government advisor, thank you so much for joining us on this Sunday morning. Really appreciate your time. Matthew Goodwin-Freeman is still in the studio with me, Conservative councillor and all-round good egg. Just here to react to some of your thoughts. First of all, let's start off with actually getting your reaction to this extremist. So I know you've been waiting so patiently to have your say about this. But Sir Keir Starmer has welcomed Alaa Abd El Fattah into the UK, saying he was delighted after the activist arrived from Egypt on Friday night, once a travel ban was lifted following UK government lobbying. Let's be very clear about this. El Fattah is the kind of individual who's called for the killing of Zionists, has called for the killing of civilians, urged support to kill the police, has used racist language against white people. He has praised Osama bin Laden and expressed a desire to join him. And he's also denied the Holocaust in a 2010 post. This is not the kind of chap our Prime Minister should be welcoming with open arms.
Well, I mean, you said it there. That's the issue. Keir Starmer has welcomed this guy back to the country in open arms, said this is a top priority for the Labour government. Sorry, the top priority for the Labour government should be protecting people, defining what working people are, because they can't define working persons, and not welcoming back someone who, as you said, denied the Holocaust even happened, said we need to kill more Zionists, said we should kill all police, and is racist towards white people. I mean, the first time I've ever realised that actually racism does seem to work towards white people as well. This is not the person we should be welcoming back in. And the thing that makes it more frustrating is not that he was welcomed back in, but the fact that this is what the Prime Minister wanted to talk about just days after Christmas. This was his thing. I have welcomed back in this Egyptian prisoner who called for police and Zionists to be killed. Wow, what a guy.
I don't know how else to end that. So, Matthew Goodwin-Freeman, thank you very much indeed for your time this morning. Really appreciate you sticking around and joining us in the studio. Right, to take us into the break, we're going to hear the thoughts of Ashley, who's sent us a voice note. But just before we do, it's time for me to remind you that if you want to get in touch, you absolutely can do the same. 0344 499 1000 is the telephone number. Let us know what you think about any of the subjects we are talking about, including the line that Christopher Biggins has come out with today from The Telegraph, where he has said he openly supports the idea of the reintroduction of the death penalty. Yes, that much-loved actor is calling for the reintroduction of the death penalty for cases of murder being committed. What do you think? Do you agree? 0344 499 1000. And also about this story about Alaa Abd El Fattah returning to the UK, the Prime Minister welcoming him with open arms. Let's see what Ashley has to say about that, and we'll see you the other side of this.
I feel actually from London, if we have people here that want to hurt us, that are foreign nationals, who are convicted of terrorist offences and serious crimes, these people should be deported. The countries of their birth, where they're citizens, should be told they are coming back, they're being sent back, and if they fail to accept them, then we will stop any flights coming into any UK airport, and we will stop trading with them. There should be no exception for that. It's their people, they need to take responsibility for them, and we need them out of the country. You know, we have enough of our own crime, we don't need people like that. And that's for this guy in Egypt that we are wanting back. I mean, this guy wants me dead, so excuse my lack of sympathy in saying that I'd prefer that he actually stayed over in Egypt. But there you go, that's my personal view.
Couldn't agree with you more if I tried, Ashley. Right, more of your thoughts and more of your messages right after this.
Brand new for 2026. It's going to be the only way to start your day. It's the home of common sense. It's where the nation can come to speak about the day's news. It's the Jeremy Kyle Breakfast Show. You know who you are. You get up, you graft, you work hard. I'm here for you. We want to hear your side. Promise you one thing. It is where the nation can and will come to talk. The Jeremy Kyle Breakfast Show, weekdays from 6 a.m.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
24 minutes past the hour of 11 o'clock. A very good morning to you. It's Phil Dave in for Peter Cardwell with you on Talk until 1 o'clock this afternoon. Getting your thoughts on all sorts of subjects that we're talking about this morning. So if you want to join in, 0344 499 1000. Let's change direction ever so slightly because we're now going to see what the latest is with Ukraine peace talks, because Zelensky has said that Russia doesn't want peace, and this is ahead of the Florida meeting with Trump. And Zelensky meets with Trump today as Russia has launched more overnight strikes on Ukraine. I'm very pleased to say that to help fill in the blanks and to help us understand what is going on, Cormac Smith, who of course the former advisor and to the Ukrainian Foreign Ministry, joins us now. Cormac, a very good morning even to you. I'm wishing the day away there. How are you?
Good morning, Phil. I'm very well, thank you.
Look, Cormac, there's a lot for us to get our heads around with this, because it seems to me that sort of to a layman like myself, who is not 100% across Ukraine, and I think most people will be forgiven for saying that they're not completely across this story. It is obviously quite a big deal and a story of our times, but where are we at in terms of peace talk? Because it seems like we've been hearing a lot about peace talks recently, but there's no sign of peace.
Yeah, I mean, Phil, you'll excuse me for saying I think the media sometimes gets a little bit incontinent with its expectations around peace talks. There is really very, very low expectations among any of the Ukrainians I speak to that anything will actually come out of this. And, you know, the key to that is the Ukrainians assess that Putin does not want peace. They're in the best place to know. But, you know, to back this up, there was a leak to the Wall Street Journal from American intelligence just over a week ago to say that the American intelligence view is that Putin's objectives in Ukraine are still maximalist. That is to take over all of Ukraine and effectively wipe any semblance of Ukrainian identity and statehood off the map.
So is there realistically any way that I say we as if I'm in any way involved in this, but you know what I mean, if the Western world can intervene enough to talk Putin off of this hang-up that he's got with Ukraine and to try and convince him to leave them alone? Or are we just sort of living in a bit of a pipe dream and it's almost like we're fighting against an impossible outcome?
Let's be very clear. The only one that can make Putin back off at the moment is Donald Trump. Donald Trump currently commands not just the most powerful military on earth, but the most powerful military that has ever existed in history. Unfortunately, the evidence is that Trump has consistently put pressure on Zelensky and Ukraine and consistently failed to put any pressure on Vladimir Putin. The original 28-point peace plan that we saw about a month ago, I described at the time as being written in the Kremlin and translated into English in the White House. Now, the 20-point plan that Zelensky takes before Putin today is a huge improvement on that. From Ukraine's point of view, that 28-point plan was effectively a demand for Ukrainian capitulation. There are very significant concessions that Ukraine is willing to make on it. Zelensky has said that he believes they're 90% there, but obviously the critical point is that last 10%. An awful lot of this depends on Donald Trump at the moment. You know, not just Ukraine, but we in the West, because this wolf will come to our door, have no doubt about it, if Ukraine were to fall. You know, we need to keep Donald Trump on side as much as possible. And the West, the European countries are stepping up in their production of armaments. The one thing that we cannot, I am reliably informed by my security sources, the one thing that we cannot replace at the moment is American military intelligence. So if America were to pull out, which I think is always a danger with Donald Trump, if America were to pull out, Europe would be left in with a very, very difficult task to continue supporting Ukraine. We would have no choice but to do that. And Ukraine, no matter how bad things get, have no choice but to continue fighting. So very low expectations. I think the best we can hope for is that we keep Donald Trump on side, or that Zelensky keeps Donald Trump on side. Obviously, the European leaders have have been lobbying very, very hard for that outcome as well.
You talk about European leaders and Donald Trump, but what about us here in Britain? Is there anything we should be doing? Because I hear a lot of people calling into talk saying this is not our issue, we shouldn't be getting involved, we don't need to fight this is on Ukraine, so on and so forth. In other words, it's up to Ukraine to fight it. It's Russia doing this, obviously, but it's up to Ukraine to fight it. Where do you stand on that argument? Is there any basis in that? Should we be getting more involved?
Yes, we should be involved. And look, there's two things I'd like to say first.
First, from the outset of this war, Britain has been among, if not the most steadfast supporter of Ukraine through both governments. That's not just me saying that, that's what my senior Ukrainian diplomat and government friends tell me. Should we be involved? Well, there's two reasons we should be involved. One, I go back to the Budapest Memorandum of 1994, where Ukraine was persuaded to give up the world's third largest nuclear arsenal in return for guarantees, what they took to be guarantees of her territorial integrity. That was originally signed by Great Britain, the United States, and Russia. Now, Russia has clearly spat on that historic document from 2014 on with the annexation of Crimea and invasion of Donbass. But I'm afraid to say initially in 2014, both the United States and Britain sat on our hands. So we have a moral obligation. But more than a moral obligation, I used the term before, this wolf will come to our door. We are increasingly seeing evidence in the hybrid or the grey zone warfare of various interference in Western countries, including in Britain. And we had that very, very stark speech only about 2 weeks ago from, I will try and get, it was 13 days ago actually, I'll try and pronounce her name correct, Blaise Metroweli, who is the new head of MI6, who made it very, very clear that we need to be preparing for the eventuality of a war with Russia. And this is only mirroring what other former senior diplomats and generals, current heads of our armed forces have been telling us now for over a year, and people in other states. So while it might be tempting to say this is not our war, I'm afraid this is our war, both for moral reasons, but also it's coming to our door. And should Ukraine fall, we're very, very clear that Russia's aims will not end with Ukraine.
Well, I think, Cormac, that it's very easy for many of us to forget that World War II mainly started the idea of Germany invading Poland. They did not start the Blitz in London straight away. So, as you rightly say, bit by bit, it could make its way to our shores. But for now, Cormac Smith, former advisor to Ukraine Foreign Ministry, thank you very much indeed for speaking to us this morning. Very much appreciate that. Right, OK, continue to take your thoughts and your messages on 0344 499 1000 right after this, as well as we'll also be speaking to Jake Wallace-Simons, the author of Never Again and How the West Betrayed the Jews and Itself, on this extraordinary story that we've been talking about throughout this morning about the fact that Sir Keir Starmer has welcomed Alaa Abd El Fattah to the UK. To many, some might call him an extremist, but apparently that warrants open arms from the UK Prime Minister. Jake's thoughts and yours right after this.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good morning to you. It's 11:35. This is Phil Dave in for Peter Cardwell with you until 1 o'clock this afternoon, taking your thoughts and your messages on this story that Sir Keir Starmer has welcomed Alaa Abd El Fattah to the UK, saying he was delighted after the activist arrived from Egypt on Friday night once a travel ban was lifted following UK government lobbying. Now, let's be very clear about this. This is an individual who has called openly for the killing of Zionists, including civilians, urged supporters to kill the police, used racist language about white people, praised Osama bin Laden and expressed a desire to join him, and denied the Holocaust in 2010. Yet extraordinarily, these are some of the more public voices who have been speaking about this. Have a listen to this.
Prime Minister Starmer.
Dear Prime Minister Starmer.
Dear Prime Minister Starmer.
Dear Prime Minister Starmer.
Prime Minister, I'm making this video because I, like a lot of people, and I should imagine yourself included, are deeply concerned.
Dear Prime Minister, I'm reaching out to you today because I'm extremely worried.
I am one of many thousands in Britain and all around the world who are deeply concerned about the fate of the writer Alaa Abd El Fattah.
The brilliant, courageous and inspiring writer who has been unjustly imprisoned in Egypt for far, far too many years.
That lot make me sick, frankly. Let's speak to Jake Wallace-Simons, author of Never Again and How the West Betrayed the Jews and Itself. Jake, a very good morning to you. First of all, your reaction to those revolting virtue signalling celebs. What on earth do you make of that?
I can't help but smile, to be honest. It's a case of either laugh or cry. I mean, they're just so ridiculous and so absurd. The fact that they can have no idea about anything other than playing parts on a stage and yet feel they've got the moral high ground to preach to the rest of us and indeed to the Prime Minister of our country who we should let in and who we shouldn't without any knowledge of who this guy is, what his position on Israel, on even our own country has been in the past. And now the chickens are coming home to roost. They've been exposed as the idiot mouthpieces for jihadism that they have become. But the thing is, it's not actually that funny because it's not only these cretinous lovies who've supported this guy, it's also the Prime Minister of Britain who has the power to give this guy a home in Britain and has used that power to welcome him into the country, even though he said the most horrendous things, not just about Jews, but also about Britain, our country, our people. I mean, he said that British people are dogs and monkeys, has urged Londoners to burn Downing Street, told his supporters to kill the police and said that he hated white people. He said that he wanted to join Osama bin Laden, and he was absolutely clear. He literally wrote, "I'm a violent person who advocated the killing of Zionists, including civilians." It could not be clearer. This is the worst person to invite into the UK. But all these lovies have been campaigning for him. The Prime Minister has now brought him in, compromising clearly our national security, standing up for jihadis once again over the interests of ordinary Britons like you and me.
Well, apart from anything, Jake, the fact that I am very openly, and I'm quietly confident I know your stance on this as well, I am very openly and proudly a Zionist. So that means that the Prime Minister of Britain supports people who wants to see me and I suspect you dead. So that's very comforting, isn't it?
Well, not just you and me, but all British people. He wants to see the police dead. He wants us to march on Downing Street. White people he hates. I mean, that's the vast majority of Britons. Once again, we find that people who hate the Jews and hate Israel also happen to hate Britain, everything we stand for, and the West in general. It's always, as night follows day, it's inevitable. They hold those two hatreds as part of the same thing. And our Prime Minister, it's like he wants to turn our country into a country of tadpoles. He's the lead tadpole, inviting sharks in to stalk us and eat us when they're ready. It's absolutely outrageous.
The tweet from the Prime Minister says, "I'm delighted that Alaa Abd El Fattah is back in the UK and has been reunited with his loved ones, who must be feeling profound relief. I want to pay tribute to Alaa's family and to all those who have worked and campaigned for this moment." I could go on, but I might be sick. So let's not dwell on that too much, but instead pick up on something that you said that I completely and utterly agree with. And that is that there is this absolute incompetence when it comes to understanding that whatever your thoughts of the actions of the Israeli government throughout the conflict of the Middle East that we have seen, which let's not forget that Hamas started. Let's remember that bit, shall we?
And perpetuated.
If you could overlook that for just, not you, if one could overlook that for just a second, and let's pretend that Israel is at perfect peace at the moment and that they are not fighting a war on 7 or 6.5 fronts, I would suggest that seeing as they are the only country in that region of the world who has shown any indication that they share the same values that normal British citizens and anyone in the West holds, why would the Prime Minister of this country think it is remotely a good idea to not only champion the idea of this individual coming back from Egypt, but actually publicly support him? He really doesn't know his country, does he?
No, I mean, the Prime Minister shamefully said that he'd made the repatriation, as it were, or the bringing in of this guy to Britain a top priority for his government, top, higher than, cutting our taxes, getting the economy working, higher than the NHS, higher than law enforcement, higher than, securing our borders against illegal migrants and bringing the overall number of immigration down. The top priority was to bring a jihadi into Britain. That's what it amounts to from this Prime Minister. Shame on him and shame on his government. It's absolutely outrageous. And yet we've seen time and time again, since October the 7th, ordinary Israeli people, even people who have survived October the 7th, who've tried to get into Britain to do talks about what they went through and so on, have been barred and arrested by border police at airports and only released.
And Israeli politicians, let's not forget. Israeli politicians have also faced a very similar fate.
Exactly. We've got far more aggression towards the only democracy in the Middle East than we do to the jihadis who are trying to kill them and who, given a chance, will try to kill us as well. In fact, they've already tried it and done it in Manchester and on other occasions. Our priorities are completely upside down. We've got a very clear ally in the Middle East, as you said, Israel, the only democracy, a flawed democracy, but all democracies are flawed, the only democracy in the region that upholds our values. In fact, I would say Israel upholds the old British values that knows who they are and knows what they want to fight for and how to defend themselves more than we do.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think
to jihadis instead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that it's more accurately to suggest that Israel upholds the democracies that we and the policies that we once used to have in this country that we clearly don't have anymore. And what I just can't get my head around is that sort of if you actually look at the chain of events here and you were to say that you've got an individual who openly calls for the killing of Zionists and civilians as well. But if you then move on to look at Israel and what Israel does and the values that it holds, and the only country in the world at the moment brave enough, actually America's just starting to creep in with this now with their strikes on IS in Nigeria, but if the only country in the world at the moment who is brave enough to stand up to the murderous and tyrannical regime that wants to wipe the West out as we know it, and yet we decide to pick on them and welcome individuals who support the regime that we should be fighting.
Yes, I mean, let's be clear. Israel is fighting our enemies for us. It could not be clearer than that. Time and time again. In fact, just a few weeks ago, Mossad gave a tip-off to various European countries, including Britain, about Hamas cells over the continent who are planning mass atrocity attacks. That was foiled. Israel's fighting our enemies. They want to kill us as well as killing Jews and Israelis in Israel. It could not be clearer or more obvious. This guy, he said, he's a great example. He said he hates white people, wants to kill Israelis, and wants to join Osama bin Laden, who masterminded the 9/11 attacks, which killed 3,000 Americans. I mean, it could not be clearer. Israel's fighting our enemies for us. And what do? We try to subvert and smear and bring down Israel in its attempts to defend us. It couldn't be more topsy-turvy. That's just indicative of the blind alley down which our culture is going, and our Prime Minister is leading the charge.
Well, Jake, all I can say is thank heavens for people like you who highlight the stupidity of our authorities, where they do behave in such a bizarre and frankly revolting way. But Jake Wallace-Simons, author of Never Again and How the West Betrayed the Jews and Itself, really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us this morning. Let's get some of your reaction to this. 0344 499 1000. There's a message here come in from Trevor, who's in London. He says, after Keir Starmer has invited and welcomed this Alaa Abd El Fattah into the UK, it must be Kemi Badenoch's first question at PM Question Time If not, make it an urgent question for the House. It seems like he invited the head of his newly formed Islamic army into the UK. That's what Trevor says. Look, I mean, I don't think for a second that the Prime Minister openly supports Islamic terror, but I would suggest that in his quest to try and treat everyone as equal, it could easily be misconstrued as that. Although I have to say, you talk about treating everyone as equal, we only have to look at the examples of two-tier policing to work out that that's not, strictly speaking, how it comes across either. This is from Heather. Has Keir Starmer lost his mind welcoming an Islamic extremist back into our country? What a nasty piece of work the Prime Minister is. Weakness have got Starmer, is a threat to our security and our country. He is a dangerous Prime Minister. That is from Heather. Thank you very much indeed for that. More of your thoughts and more of your messages as well. This text from Tom says, this vile anti-Semite, advocate of violence and supporter of terrorism, El Fattah, should be stripped of his British nationality and deported back to Egypt, where he belongs. Egypt has pardoned him, so he has no fear of implications on his return, provided he doesn't recommence his criminal career. That's from Tom in Bromley in London. Tom, thank you very much indeed for that. More of your thoughts on that story, and of course we're talking about the concept of the death penalty as well, because we have been asking you off the back of what Christopher Biggins has said, should the death penalty be reintroduced into British crime and punishment, this being because the actor, the much beloved actor, has been speaking to the Telegraph, in which from many things he's been speaking about was one of them was crime and punishment, and he said he supports the idea of the death penalty being reintroduced for those who commit murder. What do you think? 0344 499 1000. Your thoughts, your messages, more and much more after this.
Brand new for 2026. It's going to be the only way to start your day. It's the home of common sense. It's where the nation can come to speak about the day's news. It's the Jeremy Kyle Breakfast Show. You know who you are. You get up, you graft, you work hard. I'm here for you. We want to hear your side. Promise you one thing. It is where the nation can and will come to talk. The Jeremy Kyle Breakfast Show, weekdays from 6 a.m.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. There's a story that I'm about to cover now, and I was in two minds as to whether or not to do it. And I tell you why I was in two minds. And that's because that it's a line that's come from comedian, I use that word very loosely, Ricky Gervais. Because I've been, I'm in a level with you. I don't personally like Ricky Gervais' style of comedy. He's never done anything to me personally, so it's nothing against him. I just don't personally find him that amusing. However, I've been told I'm very much in the minority there. But he has come out and said that working class is the only group comedians can now still mock without any backlash, and arguing that other forms of humour are now heavily scrutinised. He was actually speaking to This Cultural Life, which is a podcast from BBC Radio 4, and he said that people understand why racism, misogyny and homophobia is wrong, but remain dismissive of the working class. Do you think he's right with that? Because here's my thinking behind it. Actually, I'll tell you what we'll do, just before I share my thoughts. Can we just prove a point? Here is an example we've got of Ricky Gervais. This is from one of his stand-up shows, I believe from Netflix, Armageddon, and it's an example of his, what one might call anti-woke comedy. So come on, Ricky, let's hear what you've got to say, shall we?
Well, I am woke now, and I can prove it. Here you go. I love illegal immigrants. Yeah, sue me now. Sometimes I go down to Dover for the day, right, and I look out, right, and look for a boat, and I see a dinghy with about 60 of them, and I go over here, like, right. And I pull them into shore, and I go, women and children first. They go, there are no women and children. Just you lads, is it? Just come on, lads. Come on, lads. If I go down there one day and there's no boat, I am absolutely gutted. I just sort of wander into town, and I stand by the traffic lights, and I wait for a big lorry to pull up, right? And I look underneath, and there's a lad sort of clutching like that. And I go, where you headed? And he goes, Gary Lineker's house. I go, it's just down there.
All right, I admit defeat. That raised a smile, but anyway, there you go. But look, to be honest with you, it's only because he's talking about a subject that makes me so angry, I might as well laugh at it anyway. But that's kind of my point, is because I don't understand sort of what the problem is with poking fun at anyone and everyone. Because as far as I'm concerned, if something is meant as a joke, it's down to an individual to either ignore it or just to say, yeah, do you know what, I realised that was a joke, it was a laugh. You can easily turn around and say, I didn't find that funny, therefore I would appreciate if you didn't say that to me again. I think that's very different. But if you're talking about someone who is a comedian, who is just appearing on either television or on stage, wherever it might be, and is just trying to have a laugh, it's up to that individual who finds it offensive not to go to that comedy performance or not to watch that comedy performance. Guess what? We live in a day and age where there are more TV channels than ever before. If you don't like the comedy, flick over to Talk, watch us for a bit and rant to us if you so wish. But whatever you do, no one is forcing you to take offence. Now, I've made it very clear that I am from a minority background. I've made it no hidden secret that I am of Jewish faith, and I'm perfectly aware that Jewish people have been the butt of jokes in years gone by on many an occasion. Believe me, they're the butt of a hell of a lot worse than jokes. And as far as I'm concerned, if someone is just having a laugh, then I recognise when they're trying to be funny. I might not find it funny, I might say, I don't want you to say that to me ever again, but as long as they're not inciting any sort of violence or any sort of hatred towards another race, colour, creed, minority, whatever it might be, I genuinely don't see what the problem is. Why are people so uppity? Funny is supposed to be just that. It's supposed to be amusing. It's supposed to be therapy, if you like. Because if we can't laugh at the world around us, well, then the alternative's a heck of a lot worse. We might as well blooming just all cry and curl up in a ball now. What on earth's the point? We have to realise that at the end of the day, comedy is just that. It's comedy. It's meant to raise a smile. And if it doesn't, don't watch it, don't listen to it. But don't get in your flipping soapbox and start whinging about it and saying, I'm offended, when you are not even the butt of the jokes. It's pathetic. You are a joke if you do that. 0344 499 1000 is the telephone number if you'd like to react to that. I believe that we can go back to our earlier discussion now of the death penalty. This is off the back of Christopher Biggins, the much-loved actor, is saying that he supports the idea of the return of the death penalty if someone commits murder. And we've got a voice note now from Ellie on that.
Regarding the death penalty, yes, if it's absolutely 100% like Axel Rudy Cabana, but no, not if you're relying on DNA, because DNA can be wrong. I know they say it isn't, but there has been cases when it has been wrong, so I wouldn't rely on that. But in the case of you actually getting caught red-handed at the scene with blood on your hands and video evidence, then yes, definitely.
Ellie, thank you very much indeed for that. Again, I put it to you, I struggle to understand this because as far as I'm concerned, you may say that DNA can be wrong and you may be absolutely right, but let's be realistic about this. The death penalty is the punishment. It's not the means to find that guilty verdict. If we do not have faith in DNA testing or DNA evidence, then we shouldn't be using that in a court of law. That is the bottom line. The punishment is the death penalty. The punishment is being imprisoned. Reaching that guilty verdict is what affects DNA. So as far as I'm concerned, if you're anti-DNA, then that might be a bit of a problem. This on the death penalty from Adam. Let's hear what he has to say.
Hi Paul, fantastic show. 100% the death penalty should be brought back. When it's categorically 100%, you know DNA evidence proves it, and there's a lot of killers in our prisons that we know categorically they did it. Yes, the death penalty should 100% be brought back. Great show.
I think you've just watered down your argument ever so slightly, Adam, by calling me Paul. It is Phil, but I'm very grateful all the same for your interaction. 0344 499 1000. I suppose you could have been listening to Paul Ross on overnight. Maybe actually, no, it was on last night. I don't know who you're listening to, but it's Phil Dave with you until 1 o'clock this afternoon. But I thank you for your thoughts all the same. Right, waiting patiently in the wings to offer his thoughts on this revolting excuse of an individual being allowed back into the UK, Alaa Abd El Fattah. This, of course, is Prime Minister Keir Starmer saying that he was delighted to welcome back this activist from Egypt on Friday night once a travel ban was lifted. Herbie is in London, to be precise, he's in Harrow. Herbie, a very good morning to you.
Thank you, Phil, and Happy New Year to you that's coming, we hope.
You, and to you.
I can't see it being a happy one, but there we are.
Let us hope. Herbie, tell us, what do you make of this cretinous individual being welcomed back by the Prime Minister?
This government is completely out of control. Fancy importing a person like this into the country. We've got enough problems now without somebody like this individual coming in and walking the streets of this country yet again, giving us nightmares of what he's going to do next and what he's about to do. We do not know what he's going to do because he's unpredictable, I think. And this government is completely lost it. They're not looking after us. They're not thinking of our security at all. They're beyond belief, I think.
I just can't argue. I mean, technically it's my job to sit here and to counter what anyone says to me, but how? How am I supposed to counter? How am I supposed to stand up? And did you see that revolting clip we've been playing out throughout this morning of all of those woke and virtue signalling celebrities who go around sort of saying, I'm so concerned about the state of this chap's health, this campaigner, what do they call him, an activist or some nonsense like that. I couldn't care less about his health. I don't care less about the state of him. I care about British people who are being put at risk by having someone who is pro-Osama bin Laden being allowed back into this country. It's unbelievable. What on earth is the Prime Minister thinking welcoming him?
Well, Phil, the problem is that these individuals do not have the problems that most people face on a day-to-day basis. They seem to be accosted from being even approached by anybody like this or even running into anybody like this. They don't live in the real world. You know, we're all living in fear at the moment with what is going to happen next. We do not know because we've got so many people coming over into the country illegally that we do not know what their status is. We do not know what their political likes are. If he doesn't like white people, then go somewhere else, you know. But to me, that's just discrimination against white people anyway, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, absolutely. Herbie, thank you very much indeed for giving us a call. 0344 499 1000. If you want to comment on that story or anything that we're talking about this morning, you're most welcome to do so. More voice notes now. Let's have a listen to what Karen has said on this particular subject. This is Karen on welcoming Alaa Abd El Fattah back into the UK. Karen.
Hi, Phil. I totally agree with your caller, Alex. This is extremely, extremely worrying. You have a government who is welcoming in terrorists? Really? I mean, come on. This is all we need to know. I'm getting sick and tired of going, oh, let's close our borders. Let's send them all back. Nothing's happening. Nothing is happening. So nobody's protecting us, are they? I mean, you know, what is it going to take in this country before something's done? How many lives are going to have to be taken before we wake everybody up? I'm already awake. I've had enough of this. I've had enough of this for the past few years. I'm getting sick and tired of being called far right because I want to keep myself safe and Jewish people safe in this country. This is really serious. We are living in very perilous times, just like we did in the 1930s, and it's come back. And we said never again, and never again should mean never again. Get Keir Starmer and this Labour government out.
Thank you very much indeed for that, Karen. I have to say that I just want to pick on one thing that Karen said there. She said that to keep ourselves and Jewish people safe. I don't think they're separate entities in this case. I really don't. As much as I completely understand where that comes from and why she says that, because of course we have seen that sort of this particular individual, this El Fattah, that he is vehemently against people who are Zionists, and typically those who are Zionists are often Jewish or indeed allies of the Jewish state. So I understand sort of why you would say that, but I think this is a major problem to the West. And let's be really clear about that, because the truth is, if you start welcoming people like that with open arms, what are the consequences of that? Because what it does is it tells other individuals who have these vile, abhorrent views that they are welcome as well. That is not the kind of message we want to be sending out from our Prime Minister and these virtue-signalling, idiotic celebrities who take to social media to start crying out and saying, boo-hoo, it's so sad what's happening to him. No, it is not. It is sad what's happening to our country. You celebrities should be ashamed of yourself. You should be crying out for the state of Britain. 0344 499 1000. Get involved.
Libya has become a major transit route for refugees and migrants from sub-Saharan Africa, and many of them come through Libya dreaming of getting to the UK, particularly from Sudan, where there has been a civil war waging for the last 2 years. And those asylum seekers or economic migrants who make it from Sudan to the UK have a 99% chance of being given leave to remain. So I spent several hours talking to immigration chiefs here in Benghazi on the east side of Libya. The Libyan National Army has a very good grip on the immigration problem, albeit fighting against a huge crisis with limited resources. There is a very, very clear process of giving people proper health checks, the life-saving care that they need, and then working out where it is exactly that they've come from. Their message to the UK is that you are fueling this problem. You are effectively advertising a great new life for people from sub-Saharan Africa. They actually said, you know, what do you think happens when a guy from Sudan comes up through Libya and makes his way all the way to the UK and gets put in a luxurious hotel and provided with everything? And make no mistake, it is a perilous journey. We see it from the end point. We see the channel crossing as the dangerous bit. But actually where these journeys begin is in the hot desert. Many, many tens of kilometres have to be covered on foot by these migrants. And as many as 1 in 4 do not make it. That means bodies in the desert. The Libyan authorities are having to recover bodies in the desert. About the UK and how much awareness. Please understand the scale of what we are dealing with here with very, very limited resources. Once again, you know, people come in from charities, from NGOs, they use warm words, and the authorities here told me the only thing that we ever get is maybe a few toothbrushes and some nappies for the babies.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good afternoon to you. This is indeed Talk. It's Phil Dave in for Peter Cardwell with you until 1 o'clock this afternoon, talking about an array of subjects that you have been getting your thoughts in thick and fast, and I'm loving it. Keep it coming. 0344 499 1000 is the phone number if you want to get involved in either making a phone call or sending a WhatsApp or indeed a voice note. But if you want to text us, it's 87222. Start your message with the word talk. In particular, what we're talking about in this hour is we're going to be looking at Sir Keir Starmer is under fire after welcoming a British Egyptian activist, Alaa Abd El Fattah, back into the UK. A figure, by the way, whose past social media posts have praised violence against the police, against white people, against Zionists, that has sparked criticism from opposition politicians and indeed from Jewish groups alike. And we're also talking about a line that has come from the much-loved actor Christopher Biggins today. He has been speaking to the Daily Telegraph, and in particular he has said that he is personally in favour of bringing back the death penalty. Now, you might say to yourself, well, hang on, what's that got to do with Biggins? But has he got a point? He wants to bring back death penalty for those who commit murder. Personally, I can't see a problem with that, but can you? 0344 499 1000. And we've also been getting reaction as well to the trans activist group who allegedly plotted criminal damage against senior political officers, including the Prime Minister's and Wes Streeting's, which has forced police and security to take notice and to take action. Later in this hour, we will be speaking to the marvellous Peter Blexley, former Met Police detective. He'll be offering his thoughts on the return of the death penalty, and we'll also be looking at this bizarre video that shows at Winter Wonderland here in London a chaos, a brawl is the only way I can describe it, that has broken out as Yobs threw punches and hurled people to the floor, and all you could hear is families screaming. Very, very curious and very traumatic footage, given that it's supposed to be a family occasion. And in just a moment's time, we'll be speaking to Reform UK councillor Layla Cunningham. Loads of stuff still to come in this last hour of today's show. I very much hope you will stick with us for the duration. 0344 499 1000. Hey, let's spend the next hour together, shall we? Okie doke. I'm delighted to say that to react to the day's big news stories, joining me now is Reform UK councillor Layla Cunningham. Layla, a very good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us on a Sunday. It's very much appreciated. What's not appreciated is the behaviour of Sir Keir Starmer, our delightful Prime Minister, who thinks it is remotely acceptable to welcome to Britain someone who I would consider to have quite extreme behaviour. This, of course, is Alaa Abd El Fattah. He's welcomed him with open arms, shall we say, because he was apparently delighted that the activist has arrived from Egypt on Friday night once this travel ban was lifted following UK government lobbying. And just to remind ourselves that this particular individual has called for the killing of Zionists, including civilians. He's urged supporters to kill the police. He has used racist language about white people. He has praised Osama bin Laden and expressed a desire to join him. Well, I wished he would join him, if you know what I mean. And he's also denied that the Holocaust happened in a 2010 social media post. This is really not the kind of person that our Prime Minister should be welcoming with open arms, surely.
Definitely not. I mean, like you said, he praised terrorists, you know, he feels hatred, he denies the Holocaust. It leaves you speechless.
I can hear you. Beggars belief, doesn't it? How can you possibly say anything about it?
You know, you're importing people who openly despise the country and values, and that the ones they want to live under. I mean, listen, you don't have to love every policy. You don't even have to like the government, right? But if your public record is a full-on praise for terrorism and hatred, you should be nowhere near this country.
I mean, what annoys me, Layla, though, is that we've got enough of those kind of cretins here already. There are plenty of people who openly support all of the things that Al Fattah has been banging on about in this country now. We should be getting rid of them, not welcoming. And for the Prime Minister to say how delighted he is he's been reunited with his family, who are probably relieved. Well, I'm not relieved. I'm very anxious at the fact that someone like this is now back on our shores.
But he didn't only say he was relieved. Didn't he say it was his focus?
Yes, he did. He absolutely, he said he made it a priority.
You know, forget about focusing on everything else. You know, open borders, young girls being sexually assaulted by men they're letting in freely. No. Let's focus on a man, getting him back here who actually hates this country and everything it represents. You know, border policy has to be rooted in, well, obviously safety, but loyalty to Britain. There must be zero tolerance for glorifying terror, and that's what this guy did. I am honestly speechless.
Yeah, I can hear it, and I don't blame you. And let's be honest, I think that both of us, even though we haven't necessarily spoken on air together before, I think both of us have probably got a bit of a reputation for not often being speechless. So I completely and utterly recognise that this is just baffling. And what I cannot get my head around is the idea that somehow the Prime Minister can't see what the problem is with this. You know, fair enough, he might agree with some of the more campaigning politics of this cretin, but at the same time, to even contemplate publicly welcoming him with open arms Someone who's so virulently anti-British and so anti-white people? Come on, Prime Minister, wake up, for goodness sake. Layla, there's a couple of other stories. Sorry.
Can I just go back to that, right? Don't forget, it was the Conservatives as well. I mean, James Cleverly.
Yeah. No, they're not free from this, but
they're not free from this at all. They talk tough, but in the end, they let these kind of people. And let's just put that into perspective. We're letting in this man while law-abiding citizens get visits from the police for tweets that say a lot less.
Absolutely.
You know, this man incited hatred and violence against Britain and British people and Jews.
Yeah.
And we're welcoming him with open arms, and we've got the government focused on bringing him back. Yet we have the same government arresting British people for tweets.
It's just unbelievable, right?
They obviously don't work for us. It can only come from a fundamental hatred of British people.
Fundamental hatred, or it has to be said, I can understand why some people do question whether or not there's something a bit more sinister going on here. Where is this love of extremism coming from? Because we're seeing it now with the newly elected mayor of New York. We're seeing this. I mean, let's not forget it's only a mere 20 or so years after 9/11. But let's also look at what the Prime Minister is doing now. It's very disturbing, to say the least. But there's loads of other stories I want to get on with you later. I don't want to run out of time. So let's move on from that for a moment and talk about this. Labour has imposed visa restrictions on the Democratic Republic of the Congo for refusing to take back deported migrants, marking the first use of this power, which was introduced in 2022 to penalise non-cooperating countries. Now, here is my problem with it, is that I think we should be encouraging people to go and use the visa system. So by actually putting blocks on visas, to me, is not dealing with the fundamental problem of illegal migration. What do you think?
Who needs a visa? Just come on a boat. Seriously.
Quite. But yes, let's assume hypothetically.
They've made a mockery of the whole visa system to allow people to come into the country via boats without anything at all, and then to say, oh, we're going to restrict visas. Also, let's just put that into perspective. The DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo, hardly a handful of people come on those boats. No one arrives here from there on small boats. Meanwhile, countries like Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iran, and Eritrea, which send thousands, they face no such sanctions.
And again, it has to make one question, Layla, what on earth is going on here?
Exactly.
Because as you talk about these countries that clearly have links to terrorist activity, and yet they're not facing the same restrictions, why are you picking on an African nation that, to be honest with you, really doesn't, well, to be honest with you, I couldn't really care much less about if I tried. So as far as I'm concerned, it's just virtue signalling. It's exactly the same attitude I have towards when governments announce that they're going to hold some sort of inquiry into something. An inquiry does nothing. All that does is it gives the politicians the opportunity to turn around and say, we've learnt our lesson, it will never happen again. No, do something. Actually take action.
Exactly. And real border enforcement means targeting the countries that actually matter, the ones we just spoke about. It's not the DRC. Nobody's sitting, not sleeping at night thinking of the DRC. I want to see a visa ban from Pakistan for not taking back all those rape paedophiles that have committed the rape gangs. What about that? But then you've got to ask, why is she not imposing visa bans on Pakistan?
Well, let's talk about the consequences for the rape gang, shall we? Because, of course, your leader, Nigel Farage, has said that he's pledged to strip civil servants of their pensions if they are found, and this is a big if, they are found responsible for allowing sex-offending migrants into the UK. Now, look, Layla, normally I hear something that Nigel Farage says and I think at last a politician who's talking sense. But I have to be honest with you, having looked into the legalities behind this, I fear that this might not even be achievable.
Why?
Well, very simply because of the laws that exist that protect pensions in this country. There are some very stringent laws, and unfortunately the only way that we could ever really say that Reform UK would ever be able to achieve something like this would be to change quite a few laws in the first place to allow it to happen. And I don't think that Nigel's made that clear enough that that's what would have to happen in order for him to be able to carry this out.
Well, I think this is a direction of travel. We're putting civil servants on notice. And anyone who knowingly endangers the British public is put on notice that they're not going to get away with it anymore.
But do you see what I mean, though, where I say that unfortunately it could be a bit misleading?
I don't know pension law as much, but what I am really focused on, what I was really happy to see, is that they'll be prosecuted. Because why shouldn't they be? It is against the law, it is against legislation to allow people into this country that endanger the British public, and that's what's been happening.
And don't misconstrue it. I don't say for a second that I'm not in favour of the idea, but I worry that what Nigel has done inadvertently is misled people to believe that this is something that would be done from day one, whereas actually this would take quite a lot of work to make it a reality.
Well, I didn't, I read the article like you did. I didn't see anything that said it would be from day one. It will be, it's the direction of travel. And I think for me, when I read it, I was like, thank God, because I'm so tired of politicians, civil servants saying just, oops, well, sorry, with no accountability. Nobody loses their job. Nobody's lost their job over the rape gang cover up. Nobody's lost their job over, illegal migrants coming and sexually offending and raping young girls. And I want to see that. I want to see being prosecuted. If you just go to Grenfell, all those people that died in Grenfell, who's lost their job? Who's gone to prison for it? No one. I'd like to see some accountability in the civil service, and that's what this is saying.
Shall I tell you, Layla, you mentioned about Grenfell there. Actually, this is a real bugbear of mine. I tell you who's been punished for Grenfell is actually ordinary, hard-working homeowners who have had to collectively pay for the removal of similar cladding from their buildings, which of course they bought in good faith, and it was absolutely nothing to do with them. And they are the ones now who are paying the price because of laws that rightly protect new builds from being built with similar cladding, but yet homeowners are having to raise an absolute fortune just to make sure that their properties hold any value, because of course they're almost valueless if they do have that cladding. That's who's paid for Grenfell.
And Phil, not only that, but I heard, and I'm not, I haven't checked it out, but I've heard from many of residents in my ward that and the council, there is only one insurer in the whole of London that will insure local authority buildings. Only one, so you can imagine, and the price is exorbitant.
Yeah.
So basically they've got a monopoly on it. So it's also leaseholders in local authority housing that also pay the price. Again, no one empowered it. No decision maker has, not that I know of yet. It's always the people.
Yeah, totally and utterly, and it's revolting. So I mean, again, left almost speechless for that. Layla, I just want to move on because there's one thing I want to touch with you just before we have to let you go. I mentioned earlier on how Christopher Biggins has called for the return of the death penalty. And I know there are people out there who say, well, that's ridiculous. Why on earth would an actor have any right whatsoever to call for it? Exactly the same way that we said that all of those wokey celebs who were crying out in favour of El Fattah returning to the UK, what right do they have? However, what he has said, he was talking about other things as well, is that he is in favour of the idea of the death penalty being reintroduced for those who commit murder. And I asked the audience that question, whether or not they support the idea. I just want to play you from earlier in the show, a clip of a caller, John in the Dordogne. This was his reaction, and I'd love to hear what you have to say about it. So have a listen to this. John, do tell us, what are your thoughts on the death penalty? Do you think that Christopher Biggins has a point? Should it be brought back?
Oh, absolutely. I'm 100% in favour of the death penalty. I would ask if Mr Farage is listening, sir, as soon as you become Prime Minister, can we please have a referendum on this matter? I think we'd win. I think we'd win comfortably.
So he has suggested the idea of Nigel putting a referendum out there on the death penalty. What do you make of that? What do you think?
Listen, there's an argument for bringing it back and there's an argument for not. Because I believe some offenders will always remain a danger, right? They'll always remain the danger. And no matter how long you lock them up for, that danger will always remain. I don't believe some terrorists will ever, suddenly love this country. And once you release them, they'll not want to destroy it. And the same with paedophiles and murderers and rapists. But, and I know it's a slim chance, and I can't help but think about it. The risk of executing an innocent person is never zero.
But the risk of locking someone up for life is not zero either. And my argument to this, my counter-argument to this all morning has been that, unfortunately, wherever that risk lies, that lies in the jury finding someone guilty of a crime, not in the punishment. The punishment is separate. The punishment is the consequence of that verdict. And if we collectively as a society have that little faith in our justice system, why are we even locking people up? The punishment is what we're talking about here. And as far as I'm concerned, if someone is found guilty of a crime, that they have taken the life of another, I say I don't want to ever pay another penny towards that person's existence, I want them wiped off the face of the planet, and I don't care who knows that.
My heart says yes. My slight legal instinct has a slight doubt. You know, I do think that the punishment should fit the crime, and right now that we are far from that, in my opinion, right now in this country.
So, what do you think would be a suitable punishment, if not the death penalty, potentially?
Well, I do think it is suitable, but that slight. Have you ever read An Innocent Man?
Ages ago, so just refresh me and refresh those for those.
By John Grisham, where a man, I mean, and that is different because the legal system is politicized in the US, but a man was wrongly convicted of murdering someone, and he was put on death row, and it goes through all the processes that went to convict him. And that book has affected me, to be honest, because that man suffered big time, you know, a lot for something he didn't do. But I'm in two minds. My heart says yes, of course. Why should Alex Rudikana, the guy who murdered those lovely little girls, why should he ever get to breathe one more day?
Where do Reform UK stand on the death penalty? Do you know the answer to that? Is there actually any policy in place?
No.
Do you think that Nigel Farage, based on how well you know Nigel, do you think that he would be open to the idea of a referendum, and could he even, do you think, persuade him to sort of put that to the British public, that at the very least, if Reform did come to power, that they would have the chance to say whether or not they want to see a return of the death penalty?
I couldn't say. But
would you be willing to put that to him?
I can only not at this point. I don't know. I as I said, I do see the argument, and even in America, where there is the death penalty, they do end up living like 20 or 30 years on death row waiting because of the endless appeals. So it's not as straightforward as it seems. You don't just get the death penalty and then you know
taken to the chamber. I know. I understand completely what you mean.
So there is a long, it's a massive. I just don't know. I don't know if another death makes one death right, if you know what I mean.
I hear what you're saying, but the only final thought I'd offer you, Layla, and this is really a position where I wish more people would be in, is as much as I understand the argument for saying that the odd mistake has happened, and yes, no doubt about it, I would find it devastating, horrendous, awful if I was on the receiving end of it, in terms of sort of say it was someone in my family who had been wrongly convicted. Of course I would hate it. But the difference is there are far more families out there who were affected by their loved ones having been killed, and the vast majority of people that are behind bars for those particular crimes that have meant that their loved ones have been killed and their lives have come to an end, they are truly innocent and they'll be punished for life, whereas yet the prisoners who are locked up get to carry on breathing. And there is just something that overwhelmingly says to me that for the odd mistake, it's not a strong enough argument to deter the use of the death penalty. But Layla Cunningham, I'm really sorry. I do have to leave it there just for time reasons. Thank you so much, Reform UK councillor and, of course, co-leader of Reform UK's Law and Order campaign. I really, really appreciate your time this afternoon. Right, your thoughts, your messages are up next. Your opinion matters. This is Talk.
brand new for 2026. It's going to be the only way to start your day. It's the home of common sense. It's where the nation can come to speak about the day's news. It's the Jeremy Kyle Breakfast Show. You know who you are. You get up, you graft, you work hard. I'm here for you. We want to hear your side. I promise you one thing. It is where the nation can and will come to talk. The Jeremy Kyle Breakfast Show, weekdays from 6 a.m.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon to you. This is indeed Talk. It's Phil Dave in for Peter Cardwell with you until 1 o'clock this afternoon. And coming up in just a bit, we'll be speaking to Peter Bleksley, of course, former police detective, about loads of things, including this discussion about the death penalty and the reintroduction of it if Christopher Biggins, our much beloved actor, had his way, because in an interview he has said we should bring back the death penalty for those who commit murder. What do you think? 0344 499 1000. Let's get the thoughts of Margaret, who's in Bedford. Margaret, a very good afternoon to you.
Very good afternoon to you. Thank you for taking my call.
Well, thank you for taking the time to call us. What do you make about this? Do you think we should reintroduce the death penalty?
No, not at all. Not at all. Because what I have a difficulty with is if you kill someone, right, that is monstrous. I agree. That person's life has been taken for no reason. But taking someone else's life, that you're telling somebody in one hand it's wrong to kill, but if you kill, you'll be killed. There's no winners in it. There's no winners in it at all. Plus the fact, many moons ago, I wasn't around when this happened, a young man called Derek Bentley got sent to the gallows when he hadn't actually committed a crime. The only reason he'd been sent to the gallows is because his co-defendant was 16 years old and wasn't old enough to be hanged, that had actually committed the crime. My fear is you're going to find lots of people who've been hanged wrongly, and years later they're going to find that they haven't done it. No amount of compensation is ever going to put up to give back the family somebody they loved.
But Margaret, in the same breath, then no amount of justice can ever be served if the person who did kill another, and though that victim's relatives see that perpetrator carrying on with their life, albeit a restricted one behind bars. And I just can't get my head around why is it that the totally innocent family who has lost a member of their family to some sort of violence that ultimately has led to them being murdered, why should the person who perpetrated that be allowed to carry on living when their loved one is dead? I can't get my head around that.
I quite agree with that. You know, there is no amount of justice, but there's no amount of justice of putting somebody to death either. I personally couldn't live with it. If it was my family, I wouldn't say I'll pat them on the back, hooray, you've done it. No, I'd be furious, to be honest, and say, well, you know, as long as they go to prison, that would be enough for me to say, for 30 years in prison is long enough to make that person say, how on earth did I get here? I just don't agree with it. I think killing anybody is wrong. So an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, the whole world would end up being blind and toothless. And I just I couldn't live with having the death penalty come back. When I was a kid, I knew about the death penalty, and I just I couldn't quite understand it. And my parents tried to explain it to me, and I just said, well, to me it's wrong. You know, you can't just kill somebody. It compounds the crime because that person's killed someone. Now the state says it's okay to kill someone and that's it. Wipe them off the face of the earth. And I understand the money that you're going to be spending on that person to keep them in prison. But I think a long stretch in prison is long enough to make them hopefully see that what they've done is wrong, and you know, how did I get here? If it's a one-off, if it's it might be an accident that they've been killed. It could be an accident, you know. But
yeah, but I mean that's a very different charge, Margaret. Then that would be manslaughter, wouldn't it? It wouldn't be sort of criminal. It wouldn't be murder. And I think that that's sort of the biggest difference. If you're absolutely, if you're talking about something that is a charge of manslaughter, then that's very different. What we're talking about here is an individual who has potentially carried out a murderous act, and that is what Christopher Biggins, I believe, is calling out for the return of the death penalty. And to be perfectly honest, so am I at this stage. But I do completely understand the moral argument, truly I do, but I just can't sort of accept that for as long as a truly innocent person has had their life extinguished, that there's somehow this idea of the state then turning around to another individual who's committed that act and takes their life as a punishment, somehow that is morally worse than the fact that a totally innocent person has died. The person who carried out murder is not totally innocent. Let's get thoughts of Martin, who's in Yorkshire. 0344 499 1000 if you want to join in the conversation. Martin, a very good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Phil. All the best.
Thank you, and to you as well. What would you like to say about this idea of the return of the death penalty, if indeed it should be brought back?
No, I'm against the death penalty on probably 4 or 5 reasons for me personally. I mean, I'm a retired police officer, so I've been at the forefront of seeing some of the most egregious, evil acts that society can perpetrate on itself. But if you look at a few points that I've always thought about is, if we're going to start with the financial side of keeping people in prison, if we're going to relate it down to that specifically as the primary reason, the financial burden of appeals processes in the USA, which is substantially less than what it costs in the UK, often, in over 80% of cases, is far exceed the cost of life imprisonment. Now, you know you can't even deport a terrorist in this country. So if you've got an army of lefty solicitors fighting at every single stage of that process, what you'll find is that the financial cost will far exceed the cost of normal incarceration.
Yeah, and I must admit, Martin, actually, it's a very valid point. I'm surprised it hasn't come up sooner, because I do know you're absolutely right with what you say with that it is true that in many a case, especially in the US, that we've seen those who appeal death row, they actually cost far more to the taxpayer in terms of appealing that sentence that has been put upon them. But I would stress that as much as I understand that argument, I would say then in that case it's not an argument to not have the death penalty, it's an argument to change the appeal process that says that after their appeal has not been successful, they can't then go on to challenge again and cost continuous thousands of pounds. The guilty verdict has got to come from somewhere, right?
I agree. I think one of the other points is the lack of deterrence for said offences.
Well, death penalty would be a pretty good deterrent, wouldn't it?
Well, it's actually proven quite the opposite. And if you read Albert Pierpoint's autobiography, who's hung more people than anyone in history, was absolutely against the death penalty and clearly stated that it didn't have the deterrence that which people who can casually just throw off, let's bring back the death penalty, would imagine. Statistics clearly show that there is not a reduction in crime, in murder, in states where they have the death penalty to states where there is no death penalty in the USA. It's quite consistent across the board. I think the other thing as well is, which the lady quite rightly pointed out earlier, is the risk of executing innocent people. Now, I might not be the most confident person in the government and the judiciary, which I certainly am not. Would you trust this government and this judiciary to be 100% across the board? Because if you execute one innocent person, the entire system falls down, and that is unacceptable. And I think there is a fundamental moral concern for anyone that there is a potential of executing an innocent person or people. And as appeals have shown, years down the line, there's a multiple numbers of people in this country which has, for most part, held the very high standards of investigative skills, and the judiciary in the past, I will hasten to add, but we still got it wrong. Now, I think if you execute one person who is innocent, I just could not support that kind of system, because I do believe there is a moral and there's an ethical concern that should be seriously considered in that. My argument would be there is a potential to give life without the possibility of parole in under hard labour with no perks whatsoever. And I seriously mean that, nothing. You work them to death. And if they have the option of taking the old suicide pill, that's on them.
Well, Martin, you see, of course, the problem with that is then, I mean, that you could argue is equally morally as wrong if you actually work a person to death. Is that any better than actually just putting them to death in the first place? I would have thought not. If anything, I would have thought that was crueler. But look, let's put that to one side, and just to also further point out, the counter-argument to this all the way through this morning has been, if, fair enough, I understand when people say one innocent person is put to death when they shouldn't be, what about the many, many victims of murderous crimes who have lost their lives at the hands of murderers? Why should we put them on the back burner compared to the risk of just one mistake? I don't know, you tell me. 0344 499 1000. More on this very subject with the marvellous Peter Bleksley, former Met Police detective, joins me next here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good afternoon to you. It's Phil Dave in for Peter Cardwell with you until 1 o'clock this afternoon here on Talk, where we are talking about the idea of reinstating the death penalty. This is because actor and, well, let's be honest, he's a bit of an acting legend, really, isn't he? Christopher Biggins, amongst many things when he was talking in an interview to the Daily Telegraph, has suggested that he wants to reinstate the death penalty, not because he's standing for politics or anything like that. He was talking about other things, but amongst crime and punishment, he decided to announce that he was in favour of the idea of that. So I've been asking you throughout the show whether or not you support the idea of the death penalty. Now, it's all well and good for us mere mortals to talk about this, but I think we should really get the views of someone who actually truly understands crime and punishment. And of course, I'm talking about former Met Police detective Peter Bleksley, who joins us this afternoon. Peter, a very good afternoon to you, sir.
And thank you for having me.
Now, look, Peter, it's all well and good for emotion to rule on a subject like this, but obviously we need your insight, we need your wisdom and understanding. So Christopher Biggins might have had his say, but I need you to have yours and what your views are on the return of the death penalty, if indeed it should be reinstated or not.
I've had the great pleasure of meeting Mr. Biggins on a number of occasions, and he is, without a shadow of a doubt, one of the most charming, delightful people I've ever had the pleasure of being in his company. But he's wrong on this point. And as much as I enjoyed listening to Martin, your previous contributor, with some brilliant points that he raised, in some regards, Martin was wrong as well. Most prisoners, in fact, the overwhelming majority of prisoners, do simply not want to be in jail. Monsters of our times, Harold Shipman, Fred West, multiple serial murders, did not want to be in prison. And after they'd received their sentences, or they knew what their future was, and that was permanent incarceration in jail, They couldn't face that, so they, unfortunately, took their own lives. That's the situation. Whole life incarceration, which should apply to many, many more prisoners, is a perfect punishment, because every day some murderous brute will have to confront their actions, the consequences of their actions, the harm they've caused, the hurt they've created. And until they gasp their last miserable breath, they will be incarcerated. And that is the true punishment.
But I can't help but feel, Peter, and I really, you know full well I have enormous amount of respect for you and everything that you say, but I just can't get my head around the concept of why is it okay that someone who is totally innocent, and I mean the victim in all of this, I'm not talking about someone who's wrongly imprisoned, but someone who is totally innocent in all of this has been caught up by some tyrant's murderous actions. Their family have to live with the consequences of that day in, day out, knowing that their loved one is no longer around. All of those people have done nothing wrong but be on the receiving end of some revolting individual's decision to end another's life. Why is it okay that they are allowed to carry on living, even if it's in prison? Why should they be allowed to carry on with their life, regardless of how watered down it is comparable to what it used to be, when their victim is 6 feet under?
Well, our elected politicians in the House of Commons and the Lords back in the 60s voted to abolish the death penalty. And I agree. I think if there was perhaps a referendum now, it would be very interesting to see what the British public think about it. But the death penalty, as Martin alluded to and Albert Pierpoint alluded to in his book, and as is seen in America, for example, is not a deterrent. It does not stop people killing one another. So that argument falls flat on its face. It then becomes simply about revenge. And do we want to be a vengeful society, or do we want to be a society that punishes? I want punishment, not vengeance. And it's very easy for me to say, because fortunately I've not lost a loved one to murder. But I've sat in the Old Bailey on many an occasion and seen absolute monsters sentenced to life imprisonment. I do accept and very much understand your point, but I don't want to live in a society that no matter how bad some people are, that we then murder them as a society ourselves.
But what about, okay, so I'm just putting this out there as a possibility. I don't know if this is the case or not, but what about the knock-on effect locking up people for life has? All we seem to hear in recent years is how our prisons are full and that we've got no more space. Surely a way to free up spaces in prison is to say that those who are not worthy of walking amongst in society ever again, if they're not a problem anymore, then that frees up places in prison. It's almost to some a double win.
Well, there's only about 70 prisoners currently serving whole life terms. There are, of course, thousands of people serving life imprisonment for the offence of murder and other very serious crimes. So it's not like overnight, if we built some gallows and hung all of those that we deemed to be unworthy of walking this planet anymore, that we would free up a massive amount of prison space. We do need more prison capacity. More people do need to be sentenced to whole life term imprisonment. There is far too much leniency, and I hope that Tracy Hanson, who's become a friend of mine, will allow me, because 10 years ago, her wonderful, beautiful, contributing to society, 21-year-old son Josh was murdered by a monster when he went out for a night out. That monster went on the run, was captured 4 years later, and only received a minimum of 26 years, which is paltry. It will never be enough. 46 years wouldn't be enough. He should have got a whole life term. So I agree that we need to review our sentencing, build greater prison capacity, and lock more murderers up forever.
Just want to play you a voice note that's come through from Anna and just get your thoughts on this, Peter. So don't go anywhere. Just have a listen to this. This is Anna, who's sent us a voice note. So 0344 499 1000 on the subject of the death penalty. Anna.
Good morning, Anna. Sorry, reference death penalty. Absolutely. I would bring it back, but only after a year in solitary confinement where you have to think about what you've done. I would also bring it back for rape, paedophilia, excessive paedophilia, and I would probably bring it back if incitement to violence results in the death of another individual. I'd probably bring it back for a lot more, actually, but that's been a bit excessive. I do appreciate my views. Thank you. Bye-bye.
So Anna there, Peter, saying that she'd bring it back for not just the crime of murder, but actually almost inciting violence that leads to other people's death, paedophilia, and possibly even rape as well. So, and it just goes to show that there is very divided opinion on this subject. But can you understand why people are so impassioned by this?
Oh, I can hear the passion in Anna's voice. She clearly means what she says. She believes in it very fervently. And I respect and understand that. And were this matter to go to a referendum, I would abide, of course, by whatever result was delivered. I think there's probably a case for putting it to a referendum. And I think if that were the case, I might well be on the losing side of the argument. But at the moment, as it stands, we don't kill our own. We incarcerate them, and a whole lifetime of incarceration where you don't see the blue sky, where you don't fraternise and socialise with friends and loved ones, where any visits you may have are strictly monitored, when the association you get is with fellow monsters, the company that these killers keep is utterly appalling. Hence, of course, we hear stories about murders in prison from time to time. It's a miserable existence. And as far as I'm concerned, I would like that system to continue with greater capacity and longer sentences.
Thank you for that, Peter. I just want to get your thoughts very quickly on a story that I've been teasing most of this show, and this is about Winter Wonderland. This Christmas Eve brawl is the way it's been described, because a mass brawl broke out at Hyde Park's Winter Wonderland. And apparently punches were thrown, people hurled to the ground, and at least one person even kicked in the head. Crowds and families, a chaos just ensued here, screaming families and children. Winter Wonderland, for those who live outside of London who don't know what it's about, it's supposed to be a seasonal pop-up fun fair, if you like, is the best way of describing it, with stalls and with rides and ice skating. It's just supposed to be a family event that you can go to and enjoy. What on earth has gone on in our society where someone even thinks it's remotely acceptable to start and then ultimately lead on to a mass brawl at somewhere like that?
I was in central London till late last night, and I saw many people getting on the tube with their huge stuffed animals and other things that they'd won or they'd paid for at Winter Wonderland. This, I'm afraid, is just a snapshot of increasingly lawless Britain. Roll up, bring your kids, they would say. Who would take your children to such an event where the propensity and the likelihood of violence is so very real? Britain, tragically, is going down the tubes, and this is an example of that.
Sadly, I have to agree with you there, Peter, but thank you very much indeed for all your wisdom, and indeed for all your wisdom over 2025. I dare say that we will speak to you again very soon. Hopefully you and I will speak in the new year, if not someone else before then. But Peter Blexley, former Met Police detective, Happy New Year to you, sir. Thank you very much indeed for your thoughts this afternoon. Right, coming up after this, we are going to carry on hearing your thoughts on 0344 499 1000. We'll get your messages, your calls in. Should we bring back the death penalty? This is what we're talking about. This is Talk.
2026. It's going to be the only way to start your day. It's the home of common sense. It's where the nation can come to speak about the day's news. It's the Jeremy Kyle Breakfast Show. You know who you are. You get up, you graft, you work hard. I'm here for you. We want to hear your side. I promise you one thing. It is where the nation can and will come to talk. The Jeremy Kyle Breakfast Show, weekdays from 6 a.m.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
The final part of today's programme. It's Phil Dave in for Peter Cardwell with you until 1 o'clock this afternoon. And we've been taking your thoughts and your calls on whether or not we should bring back the death penalty. That's because Christopher Biggins, our much-loved actor, has said that he personally believes, yes, we should. But what do you think? Let's have a listen to a voice note now. This comes from Alan. It's on the subject of the death penalty. Good afternoon to you, Alan.
Morning, Phil. Alan from Salford. I've noticed over the years they keep bringing these people they hung years ago. You know, the likes of Bentley, who said let him have it. He shot the copper. And you've got the Ruth Ellis. She didn't just shoot him, she emptied the gun in him. 6 shots. And if it had been a 10-shot gun, she'd have done the same with him. DNA, all the new things now, no problem with it. Hang them. Get rid of them. And make it for terrorists as well. Thank you.
Find it very hard to argue with you, Alan, as you probably heard throughout the show. I'm absolutely in favour of that. Let's see what Pete, who's in South Wales, says. Pete, a very good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
Pete, what do you make of this subject? Do you think, personally, just start off, do you think we should bring back the death penalty, yes or no?
No. I hate to say it. I used to think it, but I watched a documentary some years ago called Murder in the Valleys about the murder of a family in Clydach in South Wales. And I'm phoning from South Wales. I've got cousins who live in Clydach. And if I won't say anything about it, just sort out the documentary on Sky Atlantic for yourself and draw your own conclusions. And I also know from being a UKIP member that Nigel Farage always said he wouldn't lead UKIP if UKIP decided to introduce a policy of having the death penalty. He'd quit as leader. And he used the example of Derek Bentley as being one of his reasons for being opposed to the death penalty. And it's hard to argue with. I mean, I know all about some of the horrible people that we've had, but watch that documentary Murder in the Valleys, and also the one about Lynette White, Cardiff Bay, I think it's called the Cardiff Bay Murder of Lynette White. And it really makes you think, my word, what would we do if we've discovered we've hung the wrong one or executed the wrong one? I'm for it in theory, but there would have to be a heck of a lot of provisos before it would happen. And Nigel Farage, I think, has probably got the right balance, because you can't bring somebody back. And if you watch the documentary Murder in the Valley, the bloke who got convicted for that, if there'd been a death penalty, well, you can't bring him back. He actually died in prison of a different, I think he died of a heart attack. But watch that documentary. It's a 4-part documentary, and my God, it makes you think.
Thank you very much indeed, as of you, Pete. That's certainly given us food for thought. I would suggest, though, that as much as I understand when people watch documentaries like that who say that, of course, it's helped them make their mind up one way or another, don't forget that often those documentaries those kind of documentaries, I'm not saying that one in particular, can often be from individuals who feel so passionately against the idea of the return of corporate punishment or capital punishment that they are determined to actually sort of make something that will help people think the way they do. It's not necessarily a given. I think that on the off chance of someone being accidentally executed, there are far more many victims and their families instead of those who are the one-off mistakes, which, don't get me wrong, I'm not dismissing it. The mistakes are absolutely horrendous as well. Spike is in Hampshire. Spike, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Phil. You're having a cracking programme, aren't you?
Oh, well, I'm having a marvellous time. It's very depressing subjects, but I'm still having a good time all the same. But thank you very much for saying so. Spike, what would you like to say about the idea of the death penalty? Should it be reintroduced?
Yes. Now, I'll say that because people refer to the death penalty as a deterrent. It was never, ever meant as a deterrent. It's a punishment. And the punishment that is inflicted by the judge in the court on the day. He, like the defence, the prosecution, the jury, they see all the evidence that's presented to them. The jury comes to a decision of guilty. The judge then awards a penalty that he thinks fits the nature of the murder. And the ultimate, of course, would be capital punishment.
But surely, Spike, all punishment is a deterrent to some degree. I mean, it might not necessarily do a job and it might not be a deterrent, but what kind of deterrent could one impose if not the punishment at the end of committing that kind of crime? Surely it's sort of like it's a dual purpose, if you like. Part of its purpose is to deter people from carrying out crimes, no?
Yes, but as I say, I come from a time when any court judgment handed down was a punishment. It was never meant to be a deterrent. You know, the judge didn't say, right, I'm going to give you 5 years and I'm sure that will deter other people from doing this crime. They don't say that because they know what they're doing is awarding a punishment, not a deterrent. That's all I'd like to say.
Well, Spike, I think that is a perfect way to end. That'll be the last call of the show. So thank you very much indeed for your thoughts and your time. Let's work our way through some of the messages as well, because I'm very aware that a lot of people have messaged in. I've not read half of them, so I'm very sorry about that. This text message here is from Michael in Norfolk. Says, hello, Phil. I totally agree with Peter Blexley, but for how many years have successive governments kicked the can down the road on building new prisons? Don't hold your breath. Well, I mean, this is certainly one of my arguments as well, is that I can't understand why it takes so much faffing to actually even contemplate building a prison. As far as I'm concerned, you look at the way we behaved when it came, I appreciate that it's sort of slightly more secure than this, but look at the way that the government behaved in the time of COVID, and we've built those Nightingale hospitals. If we have to build sort of temporary incarceration units, well, then so be it. Do whatever is necessary. I just don't get how it takes so long. Let's have a couple of voice notes as well, by the way. This is from Michael, who's talking about this delightful cretin that, unfortunately, Sir Keir Starmer, Al Fatah, has been allowed back into the country. And this is what Michael says about that.
Hello, Phil. It's Michael. Well, Starmer Harmer protected a lot of child sex offenders when he was head of the CPS. But now he's head of this country and he's doing everything he can to destroy it, like get us back into Europe. And I think this year we'll be finished off with Ed Millipede. He'll finish us off completely. He's made it so no one can afford electricity anymore with his ridiculous 1/3 for people that won't pay the electric bill, 1/3 for net zero, and 1/3 for your actual bill. What a country. I can't think where to move to. Let's talk about where we're going to move to.
Please, you said country there. Thank you for that, Michael. Much appreciated. Might I also suggest as well, I'm perfectly sure Sir Keir Starmer would suggest that rather than defending rapists and murderers, as you said in that voice note, Michael, I think it's more likely that he probably thought that he was merely defending someone who didn't necessarily deserve quite the punishment they were in line to receive. But who knows? I don't know every single case that Starmer was ever involved in. I'm not entirely sure he'll remember it either. This is a voice note from Sharon on the death penalty.
Morning, Phil. I'd want the death penalty to come back in because we're going to, just now, there's loads of people that we could get out of the country or be gone rather than